It is 10 o'clock. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The NFL Scouting Combine begins this week in Indianapolis. Tomorrow, Titans head coach Brian Callahan, general manager Mike Borgonzi will meet with Titans media, including 104.5 The Zone. Quarterback prospect Shedeur Sanders will not be working out at Lucas Oil Stadium this week, choosing to focus on his interviews with teams, according to Ian Rappaport. And Rams quarterback Matt Stafford will be in Indy this week with permission from the Rams to speak with other teams, according to a report by Tom Pelissero. It is not a trade request, but an opportunity for both sides to gauge Stafford's value outside of Los Angeles. The Nashville Predators fell on Sunday night 5-0 to the New Jersey Devils. Their homestand will continue tomorrow against the Panthers. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Oh, yeah. Combine week is upon us. Football season went away for 2 weeks. Now it's back, baby. We're back in the full swing of things. We're happy to have you. Today is the only day that I'm going to be here in Nashville doing the radio show. I'm going to leave Lucas and Jackson to their own devices. Probably a bad idea, and head on up to Indianapolis. We got Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi both at the podium tomorrow morning, very early in Indianapolis, and then after that, they will join the radio show. So we'll look forward to having them. We also have some other special guests planned throughout the course of the week, coaches, media, things like that. It's going to be an excellent time. Ramon is going to be up there as well on behalf of Ramon, Kayla, and Will / Titans Radio, doing his due diligence. Rep Brian, Amy Wells, Coach Mack, the whole crew. It's going to be a great time. Happy football season, boys.
Happy football season, huh?
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
It feels that way this week, no doubt. The NFL is going to dominate the headlines all week in Indianapolis. You know, it's ironic that the most important things that happen in Indianapolis are the things that we are not privy to. The most important meetings, the most important conversations, whether
Don't rain
it's
on my parade today,
prospects with teams, teams with other teams. Matt Stafford apparently with NFL teams to gauge his value outside of Los Angeles. The workouts are a little further down that list, but it is a very important week nonetheless. And I look forward to hearing Mike Borgonzi and Brian Callahan tomorrow speak on their philosophy a little bit. I look forward to multiple teams around the NFL speaking this week. I can't wait to hear what Andrew Berry has to say, the Browns GM, about Myles Garrett. I can't wait to hear Duke Tobin talk again, the Bengals GM. After the last time he spoke at the Senior Bowl, he said, oh, I can't pay everybody. And you had Trey Hendrickson telling Pat McAfee at Radio Row, yeah, would have loved to not, hear that in a tweet or a text, my GM saying that as he's looking for a trade or extension.
The drama.
So there's layers, there's drama, and I am looking forward to everything that comes down.
Indeed. And, of course, there's new football players or college football players who will soon become new NFL players. They're there to, it's about two things first and foremost. Yeah, the Underwear Olympics are fun. They'll televise them this weekend and all that good stuff. But it's about the physical first and foremost. What's going on? How do you check out? Is everything where it's supposed to be? Is everything recovering the way it's supposed to recover? If you're coming off an injury, things like that. Medical evaluations first and foremost. And then, honestly, the mental. Like, you're poking and prodding around in these guys' heads as well, trying to figure out who they are, what they're made of, and how that's going to fit into the culture of your organization. It's 18 minutes, so it's speed dating, but it's still invaluable, especially for a team like the Titans that has met with one of the top quarterback prospects, but not the other. You can check a very important box this week by deciding whether or not you vibe with Cam Ward and the personality that we have seen come through. I think in a lot of these social media clips that are making the rounds, I know the things that got the most attention were his workout with Shedeur Sanders at UNLV here in the last couple of weeks, at a better part of a month at this point, where they're obviously jawing at one another. They're going through the drills, things like that. Very competitive stuff you like to see. And the Titans have to decide whether they want that to be a part of their fabric moving forward, or if that is something that they would be best served exploring other options, like a trade, for example, which is something that Coach Mack brought up with us last week. Lucas asked him a very good question about the last time the Titans had the number 1 overall pick. And dating back to 2016, so that's, a decade ago at this point in time, John Robinson's first year on the job, Mike Mularkey, no longer the interim, now the full-time head coach, or then the full-time head coach heading into the 2016 season, and the Titans with the number 1 overall pick. The difference between then and now, with Mike Borgonzi, 2 GMs later, is that the Titans in 2016 thought they had the quarterback situation figured out. That's 1 year, 1 season removed from Marcus Mariota being the number 2 overall pick. So quarterback was not a question at the time, and the Rams traded up with the Titans for the right to draft Jared Goff, and the rest is history as a result. You know how many players that trade netted that immediately contributed for the Titans?
Yeah,
because I had to go back and look it up last night, and I obviously I covered that draft and then that team, those following teams, but I had forgotten just how many players that entire transaction, just that one transaction, netted.
Yeah, it was a pretty good draft for John Robinson.
Well, a pretty good 2 drafts. I know some people would nitpick things like Corey Davis, who was also a part, technically, of that transaction because the Rams gave up 2 first-round picks that year, the 2016 first-round pick and then the 2017 first-round pick, which allowed then the Titans to have 2 first-round picks in 2017, which became Corey Davis and Adoree Jackson. But you're talking about Derrick Henry, Austin Johnson, who was a role player here and had a solid career. I believe he was still wandering around the league as recently as 2 seasons ago, if I'm not mistaken. You talk about Corey Davis, even guys like Kalen Reed and LaShawn Sims, who did end up playing. Almost all of these players contributed in some form or fashion, either right away or the following season, because the NFL comes with injuries. We understand this. And all 7 of those players that ended up being netted by the Titans out of that number 1 overall pick deal in 2016, almost all of them contributed right away. Jack Conklin, Austin Johnson, Derrick Henry, both cornerbacks, Sims and Reed, Corey Davis, and Jonnu Smith.
Well, that draft as a whole, the 2016 draft, is a great example on why you want as many bites at the apple as possible. 10 picks in that 2016 draft. And I know Corey Davis came out of that trade, but that was obviously the following year, like you said.
And Jonnu.
There were some misses in this draft, without question. Kevin Dodd, for a while, was John Robinson's biggest bust, the second-round pick out of Clemson.
He wasn't technically a part of that deal. That was their own second-round pick.
Right, I understand, but I'm saying this draft as a whole being a good example as to why you want as many swings as humanly possible, because Dodd was a big miss. And, Austin Johnson helped this team a little bit, but I don't think you got in his Titans career what you want to get out of a second-round pick. He
wasn't a better pick than Derrick Henry, who was taken after Austin Johnson.
And then Kevin Byard in the 3rd round. Tajay Sharp helped this team as a 5th-round pick. You mentioned LaShawn Sims. You mentioned Kalen Reed, a 7th-round pick corner. That helped this team. So there were some misses in there, but there were also some foundational, franchise-changing players in that draft because they had as many swings as they could possibly muster in that trade back from number 1 overall.
Because immediately people jump into the comments like Daryl or Darrell on YouTube saying, missed CMC and Mahomes in 2017. Okay, you didn't need a quarterback in 2017. Like, I understand it's fun to play revisionist history and to do it with the results in hand, but honestly, like John's percentages in the first 4 drafts, the following 3 were obviously disaster, but in the first 4 drafts, John Robinson put together a winning team. This was an AFC contender for a solid chunk of time, about what you expect the life expectancy of any competitive franchise to be as they cycle through, and it ultimately ended up with 6 winning seasons, which was more than this franchise had accomplished in quite some time prior to it. And John basically had to strip it down from the studs and decide whether or not number 1 overall was worth it. And since they weren't taking a quarterback, obviously, then it wasn't worth it. And they were able to come up with a decent haul. So you can go back and look at these players, because I understand what you're saying about Austin Johnson and Kevin Dodd and things like that, nor would I push back on that. But because of the Austin Johnsons and the Kevin Dodds of the world, Dodd obviously a bust. Austin Johnson ended up playing, I think he had a 5 or 6, maybe 7-year career, which is not bad. It's not good. You want more out of a second-round pick, but I get your point. Those hits and misses happen all the time. You can't account for a number of different things. You have no idea how long those players are going to last because injury is always out there looming. You have no idea. You like to imagine that you do enough vetting on the front end to understand the personality, But at the end of the day, and I was having a conversation over the weekend with a buddy about this, like these are children. When they get to the NFL, I know that's kind of changed here in the last couple of years because of COVID and the additional eligibility, and now you have players coming out at 24, 25, but Anthony Richardson's still 22 years old, things like that, like children. So you cannot totally account for all the personality developments, all the personal developments that will take place over that time as well, because Kevin Dodd, I don't know, he wasn't awful in his rookie year, wasn't an impact player in his rookie year, and then he just disappeared heading into his second season. You remember that? It turned into a whole TMZ type of situation. Where in the world is Kevin Dodd? And then he showed up fat and out of shape for training camp, and he was gone very soon thereafter.
Yeah, finished his rookie year on IR, and then the drama that followed. But, I mean, that's the point of that draft. There were some bad misses. You can look back at some of the Eagles drafts over the years. Some terrible misses from Howie Roseman. But the more cracks at it you have, the more likely you are to land players that can help your foundation moving forward. Sometimes it is just a straight up gamble. Roll the dice, play the board, right? Are we past that?
Oh, God. Yeah, that didn't work out. Or at least not to plan. It didn't work out for Rand Carthon. Rolled the dice and play the board. But that's old news, right? We're on to the next iteration of Titans leadership, and Callahan and Borgonzi and Brinker and Nihill and Amy Adams Strunk and everybody else involved at the top of this thing, and then the trickle-down effect for everybody responsible for getting this thing up off the mat, as we've talked about. UW on YouTube says, children, these are men. I don't know, man, like 22 years old. 20 years old, even 25. Like, I don't know. Did you feel like an adult at 25 years old?
No,
I didn't. But
I still don't.
I have maturity issues.
We're bad examples.
Just on
I don't
us.
feel like an adult.
I mean, Tennessee running back.
You're 26 now?
I'm 25.
You're 25 now? Well, you're a far cry from an adult. Look no further than Jackson.
Well, these guys have been under the spotlight a lot more than any of us. So, especially players that have played at high-level programs. But yeah, like Tennessee running back Dylan Sampson is one of 10 prospects that are going to be 20 on draft night.
Yeah. So, they're still kids, even if they look like giant 300-pound rage monsters, because they are at the end of the day. 615-737-1045. I don't know. I've got good energy. I feel good about this. I feel excited about the opportunity to cover the combine. Maybe it's the extra juice out of the quarterback stuff, but this is an exciting time for Titans fans. You should relish this opportunity and embrace everything that comes as a result. Today's really going to be the only kind of, it's not a slow day, it's a Monday. But today's really going to be the slowest day of the week, because once we get up to Indy, kids, it's full speed ahead. The events start tonight as far as everybody gathering, and then the media will begin tomorrow. Like I said, we will have full coverage of those press conferences for you. We will have Brian Callahan. We will have Mike Borgonzi. It's going to be a great time had by all. It's a good time to subscribe to the podcast or subscribe to 1045 The Zone's YouTube channel, because, of course, a good deal of this is going to be produced digitally as well. So you can get it on demand. You can go back and watch the interviews, because we're going to do a lot of them throughout the course of the week. Great time had by all. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. There are so many misconceptions out there about treating erectile dysfunction, and the Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to debunk those for you, because they've done that exact same thing for guys in Middle Tennessee for over a decade, and they're here to help you if you're experiencing any kind of situation related to ED. Lots of men assume that if the pills don't work, they have no other options than, for example, irreversible surgery to treat ED, and the sad reality is that if you go to a doctor to get treatment, those may be the only protocols that they have available for you. Do not go through something like irreversible surgery to get ED treatment before you have talked to the experts at the Tennessee Men's Clinic, because they specialize in men's sexual health issues. It's all they do. It makes them the experts in the field, and they have access to multiple protocols and options to treat your ED based on your specific needs and what's going on in your body. So don't trust your health to an online pharmacy, and don't feel like you're out of options. We want you to understand all the options you have at your disposal disposal for ED treatment. The Tennessee Men's Clinic protocols are patient-centered and customized to your needs. They have treatments for everything from low testosterone, ED, treatments that increase size, stamina, and everything else in between. So schedule an appointment online today at TennesseeMen'sClinic.com for their Franklin or Midtown location, or call them 615-208-9090. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken, the best hot chicken in the world. If you are thinking about your lunch plans, think about Hattie B's, any one of their Middle Tennessee locations. Download the app today and you can get delivery. If it's your first time ordering via the app, you can get a free dessert as well. We have a lot of time that will pass between now and the NFL draft. Free agency, obviously, combine comes first, then free agency. Then we can get into all the different things about how that changes team strategy, what that changes for teams' needs. Some of it will just be buffering some of the needs that teams have. For example, the Titans, they could use a wide receiver in free agency. They could also stand to draft a wide receiver this year. These are the kind of things that we'll be thinking about between now and then, but the combine is up first. Now, we had Coach Mack on the radio show on Friday, and Mack was asked a question by Lucas that I thought was very thoughtful. I don't give Lucas credit for much, but this was a good question by him, because the Titans have had the number one overall pick here in the last 10 years. It was 2016, like we talked about in the first segment. And as we mentioned, they traded out. That was part of John Robinson's first move, one of his most meaningful moves to put this thing back together and to put them on the run that they ended up having. Was everything perfect? No, but rarely they are, and it still was good enough to get this team regularly competing for the AFC South and ultimately at least vying for a Super Bowl in the AFC Championship going back to 2019, 2020, 2021 as the number one overall seed. They had a good run for a period of time, and now it's time to figure out how they can do it all over again, if they can do it all over again with the new pieces and parts. But Lucas asked Mack the question about how soon the conversation for the 2016 number one overall draft pick trade began, because famously, Mack was still a part of the Rams coaching staff, and the Titans at the time were engaging in discussions, not just with the Rams, but the Rams ultimately ended up being the team that got the deal done. This was Coach Mack describing when those conversations started before the pick was ultimately traded 2 weeks before the 2016 draft.
About 2 days before we went to the combine, and then coincidentally, our suites were side by side at the combine that year. So it was very, very easy. But it started about 2 or 3 days before the combine, and then really heated up at the combine, which is where most of this goes on, which is really where it starts to heat up, because as you guys well know, everybody is there. The setup now in Lucas Oil is ideal because everybody has a suite. It's very accessible to walk around. You know the times that everybody is going to be in there. So this is a big, big part of where the free agency talks and trade talks begin, and that's why it's so valuable, to be there. And you've got a lot of your staff up there, and it's important that everybody has a role. But there's a huge role as far as the decision makers that are going to be involved in trades, just like the trade that we made with the Titans for the number one pick. They can get together, face to face, real easily up there for the entire week, and that's where it starts.
So that's Mack talking on Friday. You can go check out Mack's weekly visits with us via the podcast. Or you can catch him this Friday. We'll do it live at the Combine, one would imagine.
If you come back from Indianapolis without having figured out who the Titans are next to in Lucas Oil Stadium, I will consider your time there a failure.
I think that's a reasonable request by you. That's a pretty easy thing for me to figure out. Yeah, because, to your point, sometimes it's just about proximity. Like, who's around you? Obviously, there has to be a team interested in trading up. But if one of those teams just happens to be next door to you, and it's just as easy as walking out your door, walking through theirs to talk about this as they take in the drills and all these things that will be spread out through the end of the week and then into the weekend, because they've started they've been doing this for a couple of years now, but they've started televising the drills. So teams will be like Mac. Mac will go Monday through Monday. Most teams will do the same, not their entire staffs, but it's at least a good portion of them as they figure these things out. So
there are 4 teams in the top 10 that are within striking distance, right? And they're the obvious ones. It wouldn't make a ton of sense for the Browns to trade up to 1. They're going to be able to land one of these 2 quarterbacks regardless of what happens with the number 1 pick, unless they are just head over heels with one of these guys. And that's if they want to draft a quarterback.
If they move Myles Garrett, it becomes a completely different conversation.
But for right now, you look at the Giants with the third pick. They have 7 picks in this draft. They have no 6, and they have 2 7s. The Raiders at 6, they have 8 total picks in this draft, including 2 third-rounders. Titans do not have a third-round pick. The Jets are picking at number 7 overall. They have 8 total draft picks. They also have 2 third-round picks. And the Saints pick at 9th overall. They also have 8 total draft picks and 2 third-rounders.
Taylor asks an interesting question on YouTube, or poses an interesting thought. He says, I'd love to know how their positions, like how their locations are determined, like who is responsible for where teams are based within proximity to one another and spread out throughout the course of the suite setup in Lucas Oil. I don't know how they go about that. That's an interesting question. Perhaps I can find that out too when I'm figuring out logistics about who's around the Titans. Who could they potentially trade with or trade for? 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to get in there. So how many teams, or which team do you think is the question that I would pose to you out there in the world, is which team do you think can have the most meaningful reason to come up and trade with the Titans? Which team do you think has the greatest source of motivation to get up there, if that is in fact the route that the Titans choose to pursue? We could come out of this and they could love Cam Ward. They could maybe not be thrilled with their interactions with Cam Ward, and then that have them pivot to Shedeur Sanders. We don't know what determination they will make on these quarterbacks, and they will not disclose that publicly. But it is worth talking about all scenarios on the table, and all scenarios on the table include a trade at this point in time. So we talked about the Browns. Browns unlikely to trade up. They're sitting at 2, Titans at 1. They could, if they wanted to, just taking it by order. They could, if they wanted to, trade up just to keep, if they are in love, like Lucas said, with one of these quarterbacks. They could keep the Giants or the Raiders or somebody else from trading up if they were prepared to make a substantial offer to Tennessee. But it wouldn't have to be as substantial because you're only trading back 1 slot at that point in time. You still have to make the juice worth the squeeze, but still. You then have the New York Giants at 3. What is the desperation level in New York right now?
It's higher than any of these other teams we're going to discuss, to me.
Including the Jets?
Including the Jets, yes. The Jets have a first-year coach and a first-year general manager. The Giants have a head coach and GM that are returning under immense pressure with their owner publicly stating how impatient he is. So without question, the Giants are under more pressure to figure out the quarterback position than the Jets. Obviously, there is pressure there in Cleveland coming off a 3-14 season. I mean, Andrew Berry is probably feeling it right now with all the Myles Garrett stuff swirling. A quarterback that not only has blown Achilles, but also has given him nothing after a monster contract in Deshaun Watson. So he is certainly feeling a level of pressure, but for me, it's the New York Giants. They seem to be the most QB desperate and the most QB impatient team that the Titans could possibly go into business with if they're going to move from the number 1 pick.
So I was just kind of skimming various beat reporters that might have a team or that cover a team that could potentially be in the running to trade up. And Jordan Renan has covered the Giants for ESPN for a long, long time. And he writes this of a potential trade for the Giants with the Titans for the number 1 overall pick. Quote, the Giants' first and second round picks, numbers 3 and 34, provide similar or more value than the top pick based on most modern draft charts. Even the Giants' third round pick, number 66 overall, and perhaps a 2026 second round pick might provide enough value. If packaged with number 3, for the Titans to make such a move, if they are not smitten with Ward or Sanders and want to defer their quarterback decision another year, this is likely what it would take for the Giants to make such a move. Number 3 overall and day 2 picks, plural. Perhaps they could be asked to throw in another mid-round pick or future selection as well. If they are sold on either quarterback, that should not preclude them from making such a potential franchise-altering move. So Jordan Renan, and he's just looking at draft charts, not necessarily. He's not citing sources or conversations that he's had within the organization, but he's saying, yeah, number 3 and a day 2 pick to be named later. That's all it should take to get the number 1 overall pick from the Titans, which is a significantly different offer than the person who was reporting on the Jets and Titans interactions last week, was saying that, there was six day one and day two picks.
5 or 6 picks within the first 2 rounds for this year and next year. Yeah, it was insane. The Giants do not have a 6th-round pick. They have 2 7s. So they have 7 picks in this upcoming draft. The other teams we listed in the top 10 that could be looking to trade up for a quarterback have 8 and have multiple 3rd-rounders, which the Titans are obviously lacking. So this is going to be a good test of just how desperate the Giants will be to go up and get a quarterback, because they have roster needs all over the place too.
Yeah, they're bad.
So
turns out they're really bad.
I look at a team like the Jets that we know the Jets are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. There is no clear path forward at the quarterback position for the Jets unless they wanted to do a gap year with Tyrod Taylor, unless they wanted to give Jordan Travis a look, the quarterback from Florida State that everybody's forgotten about since he broke his leg at the end of the 2023 season. But the Jets have, I would say, a substantially more talented roster than the Giants or Raiders.
Yes.
Or Saints. And they have capital. They have 8 picks this year.
The Jets have more top-tier star players than any of those other teams. The depth of those rosters could be debated.
Yeah. I mean, you don't pick in the top 10 if you have a deep, talented roster for the most part, unless you've traded into that spot. So I do look at the Jets as a team to kind of keep an eye on that could be well-equipped to plug in a rookie quarterback. They have a lot of work to do on the offensive line, but they've got capital to do it with. They have no 2nd-round pick, I will say that, but they do have 2 3rds, 2 5s, and 2 6s.
It's just, how comfortable are you moving back that far, right? And again, understand this, because this was a similar situation to 2016. The Titans traded out of number 1, and they traded back to, was it 15 or 16 was the Rams pick? Either
15.
Mid-teens, 15.
Conklin was the number 15 pick.
No, Conklin was the number 8 pick.
That's right. I keep forgetting they traded back into the top 10 for Conklin.
So just because you trade out of number 1 overall, because people would say, well, if you trade back to 15, it's a disaster. It's a nightmare. What are you doing? You have so many needs. You need a better player than you can get at 15. Okay, take a breath. It's all right, because I see some people in the comments, specifically M-Boy on YouTube. He said, the Jets, hell no, nobody's moving down that far. All right, well, just because you moved down that far the first time around does not mean that you cannot move back up. John Robinson traded from 1 to 15 ahead of 2 weeks before the draft, and then in the draft order that night, on that Thursday night, he traded back up to 8 to get Conklin.
They traded with the Browns, so the Titans went from 15 to 8.
Ironic, because Conklin ended up playing for the Browns anyway.
That's true. So the Titans traded their first, the 15th overall pick, and 3rd-round picks to the Browns in exchange for the 8th overall pick, as well as a 6th-rounder.
So, for the Jets specifically, like just kind of, and it'd be worth grabbing a couple of beat writers up at Indy just to kind of gauge that. I think we did a good job of that with like Carmen Vitale, who covers the NFC North. Obviously, the Bears had the number 1 overall pick last year, and Madeline Burke, who is the Giants team reporter, to kind of give context for the teams around Tennessee, with people who are, boots on the ground reporting type of stuff. So perhaps we'll work some of that into the combine coverage this week as well. But like, if you're the Jets, finding the franchise quarterback is still the number 1 priority, right? Like for the Titans, here's the difference to me. Finding the franchise quarterback is still the top priority for the Titans. The quarterback plan is the top priority for the Titans. But, Lucas, do you think that the quarterback plan has to be entirely accomplished this year?
No, the quarterback plan for the future does not hinge on being accomplished this year.
Correct.
There does have to be a plan at quarterback that can keep this team afloat this year.
But
for Brian Callahan's sake.
For sure. But my point is, like, the quarterback plan can work in phases. It doesn't have to be, all right, we got a quarterback. That's the quarterback. Quarterback plan accomplished, right? It can be the kind of stuff that we're talking about. Stopgap vet. All right, maybe you still draft a rookie player. You have a number of different things that can satisfy what the quarterback plan can look like and accomplish that plan in multiple phases as long as you feel like you have a sound process. And they've got a lot of various football minds with a significant amount of football experience in this room now between Borgonzi, and we talk about Brinker, we talk about Reggie McKenzie, Dave Ziegler, all these different people, and then the people that work under them that will bring things to the table as well that can help put together the most coherent quarterback plan. Because they are not somebody, and because one of the biggest questions that Borgonzi has to answer this year is, do you want to be tied to a quarterback in year one? If the answer is no, then the quarterback plan looks different. For the Jets, I think that's not the case, because I understand what you're saying about new GM, new coach, and maybe that resets the board on these things. But Woody Johnson was last year talking about one of the most talented Jets teams ever assembled. I'm sure deep down somewhere in his core, he probably still thinks that way. And so the urgency to get the quarterback done this year, I think, stands out next to a team like the Titans, where you're looking at it like, I know fans wouldn't be happy with them slow playing a quarterback plan, but the Titans have a longer runway, I think, to accomplish that versus a team like the Jets that comes with the pressure that New York brings anyway, and comes with an owner who has already displayed a level of meddling that can influence how things go there. The Jets, to me, seem like the most desperate of the partners in this, even though the Giants feel like they're teetering.
I just disagree. I mean, the decision makers, the guys who are making the draft pick for the Giants, literally have their backs against the wall. Like Aaron Glenn just got there. He's got a blank slate right now with the New York Jets. So it's hard for me to say that they face more pressure than the Giants, especially with all the turbulence just across that roster in New York with the Giants over the last year or so, and the owner speaking out. Chill Mode on the F&M Bank chat says, what if the Titans decided to choose violence and pull a Texans move and take Cam/Shador and then trade back up to take Carter or Hunter? Of course, the Texans took C.J. Stroud and then traded back into the top 10 to take Will Anderson.
The Texans were closer, right? They had the franchise left tackle in place. They had drafted along the offensive line for a couple of years leading up to that point. They had the wide receivers. They had the bones of the defense. Obviously, they spent free agency this past offseason filling out the things that they felt would help specifically take their pass rush over the top. They spent capital on players like Derek Stingley leading up to that draft. They were a much better team to where it made sense for them to forego some additional draft capital to get additional premium players.
Well, and they had just that, additional draft capital.
Yeah.
The Titans do not have the ammo the Texans had that year.
Again, do not compare the Titans situation to the Bears. Do not compare it to the Lions. Do not compare it to the Texans. This is unique to them. So while there are different lessons that can be learned by the Titans from all of those different experiences, all of those different trades, all of those different strategies, do not look for a one-to-one comparison. You're not going to find it.
Yeah, Curtis points out the Texans had a ton of capital from the Deshaun Watson trade to play with, to move all the way up to pick twice in the top 10. Titans have nothing close to that for this year.
Giles says Titans media needs to put more pressure on the organization. Brother, have you not been here for the last 6 months with me calling them an unserious franchise and excoriating them at every turn? What are you talking about? What more can I do other than pitchforks and torches outside of the facility? There's only so much that can be done from screaming into the void. I know, I did it for 3-14 this year. 615-737-1045 is the number. We'll get back to that. The Jaguars finally hired a general manager. Congratulations to them. It's Combine Week. They finally got their guy. Are they announcing it in Jacksonville and then immediately putting him in a car or a plane to get him up to Indianapolis? Because I think his introductory press conference was this morning, if I'm not mistaken. We can touch on that later on in the show, but there was a huge win for the Vols over the weekend that we need to talk about that, so we'll do it coming up next. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. We will pivot back to the football conversation because the Combine begins this week. Ramon's going to be up there. I'm going to be up there. Titans Radio going to be up there. That is going to look a little different without Mike Keith, though. That's, man does a lot. You know, I know they're aware of that, and they all bust their ass, and they've been working very, very hard, and I am sure that their coverage will not miss a beat, but it'll be weird to not just see Mike over there with the rest of the Titans Radio people.
There will be a lot of checkpoints where we're going to be like, oh, man, it's weird not hearing Mike Keith doing this. But you're right. They're going to crush it. Amy and Rhett and Mac and Ramon. Draft coverage will be extensive this week from them.
So we will pivot back to that momentarily, but there was a big win for the University of Tennessee over the weekend. Chaz Lanier, season-high 30 points, 8 3-pointers in Tennessee, the number 6 team in the country before the poll comes out today. Undid number 7, Texas A&M in College Station, 77-69. It is something that we talked about in the lead-up. What version of Tennessee were we going to get? Road games in the SEC. Always a difficult challenge. Road games in college basketball. Just ask Purdue. You clowns, eat it. Over the weekend.
Did y'all beat Purdue?
Yes, they did at home. It made me very, very happy. Now, inevitably, they will lose to Penn State when I'm in attendance on Wednesday, and I will be in self-harm mode again.
A Mike Woodson masterclass on Saturday.
He's going to get them into the tournament, and I'm going to scream, but that's neither here nor there.
Why would you scream about an icon of college basketball going off into the sunset into the NCAA tournament?
Because I want his career to be over. Anyway, Tennessee, big win. You were looking for the level of consistency. You were looking for the level of scoring. You were looking for Chaz Lanier to show you something to help elevate this team, right? We're talking about they had the Dalton Connect factor at any given point last year, and sometimes it could not be consistent. I won't say that it couldn't be consistently relied upon, but like he can't be expected, or he couldn't be expected to do it every night. So you're putting it on Zakai Ziegler on a regular basis. Sometimes he can bail you out. Sometimes it's not enough. Chaz Lanier coming through in a big spot in College Station, though, was huge for them, and they are able to handle a quality opponent on the road.
One thing Dalton Connect did not do in his incredible year at Tennessee was score 30 points on the road against an AP top 10 team. In fact, only 2 players in the SEC have done that in the last 20 years. Only one has done it in conference play, and that's Chaz Lanier. 30 or more points on the road against a top 10 conference opponent. Chaz Lanier, the only player in the SEC since 2005 to accomplish that feat. He was red hot, started this game, 6 of 6? From three-point land, finishes 8 of 13 on the day and even 30 points. Tennessee got beat in a couple phases in this game. As expected, they were dominated on the offensive boards. I guess I shouldn't say as expected. Texas A&M, as Dave Pasch reminded us multiple times throughout the broadcast, is the best offensive rebounding team in the country. Tennessee would have liked to have done better than getting beat 14-8 on the offensive glass, but to survive that and hit enough shots, they were really good from the floor. A&M had a dreadful day shooting from 3. Tennessee, defended Wade Taylor the fourth really well on the perimeter, but also a little bit fortunate that he had an 0 for 9 day from beyond the arc. Much needed win. Much needed. Like you said, talking about consistency with this team, for them to turn around after a week off and go beat a top 10 opponent, that is the 9th quad 1 win of the year for Tennessee. So it's a huge step towards one of 2 major goals for this year. The first being Tennessee's first ever 1 seed in an NCAA tournament, and the second being a top 4 seed in this SEC tournament, which we know how important that'll be at Bridgestone Arena to have that top 4 seed and not have to play on Wednesday or Thursday. Tennessee is still on the outside looking in of that top 4 in terms of seeding in the NCAA tournament. They're the number 5 overall seed. There were no major losses between Auburn, Bama, or Duke or Florida over the weekend, but they do get a chance to go head-to-head with Bama on Saturday. Tennessee plays LSU this week on the road. Very winnable game. LSU has struggled all year. Then they host Alabama Saturday. That could be a huge step towards that 10th quad 1 win and giving Alabama another loss to put Tennessee in a great spot to push for a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So this was a, massive, massive win. Lanier stole the show, but Zakai Ziegler with the dagger at the end said after the game he told Jordan Gainey, give me the ball, it's going up and it's going in.
Right in front of the Vols bench, too.
Right in front of the bench,
going.
Inbound play on the left wing, catch and shoot, rainbow 3, drilled it. Game was over at that point. So, and nice job by Tennessee to survive a first-half scoring slump. too, that Lanier was able to dig them out of.
Yeah, no, to your point, it's not just about any one player. Obviously, basketball with 5 players on the court, you have the ability to impact the game more as just one individual player. But Ziegler, I thought, had a nice night. I thought Jemai Mashak showed up in critical moments, specifically that tip-in that he had to rebound off a Jordan Gainey missed three-pointer. That was a critical moment. Like, you're just getting you got contributions from everybody that you needed to get that win, right? They all showed up in critical moments where you needed them to, and that's not necessarily something that we've come to expect because sometimes guys can go cold, and that's been a part of the story of their season.
Mashak can be a frustrating player sometimes because he's obviously an elite defender. He's a massive leader for this team. We understand that, but offensively, he has his challenges, right? I hear Blaine talk about this all the time, that Jemai Mashak has got to find some sort of offensive game if he ever wants to play in the NBA, right? Elite defender, but the offense typically just isn't there. We heard Rick Barnes all offseason talk about just how many threes Mashak got up in the offseason, yet still it feels like he passes up shots. It feels like he'll drive into the lane with an awaiting defender who's giving him the perimeter because he's not afraid of the three-point drive, but Mashak will dribble right into defenders. A lot of frustrating moments. And then he'll do something that changes the game, like a tip-in, like a corner three against Vanderbilt. It feels like when he does have his good moments on offense, they come when you need them the most. So I'll give him that, even if there are inconsistencies there and maybe not enough offensive production. But, yeah, overall, great team effort, even though Lanier kind of took charge scoring the ball. And they did this with Igor Milicic Jr. playing 19 minutes. He was in early foul trouble. I mean, he picked up his 4th foul, I think, with 6 minutes to play. Just didn't have a chance to make much of an impact towards the end there. And he's on the bench at the end of that game, and they found a way.
So the Vols are at LSU coming up on Tuesday night. The Aggies will host Vanderbilt, who just got a significant win of their own over number 24 Ole Miss. That was an impressive win for them to get. They are now 18-9 on the season. They are 6-8 within the conference. They were coming off a 3-game losing streak and needed to stop the bleeding, obviously, as they try and solidify their chances to get into the tournament this year. But they moved into 10th place in the SEC with the win. There's 4 games left in the regular season?
Yep.
At this point in time, I think they're making a pretty compelling case. The resume is tough to argue with. I think they're going to end up shaming us into putting them in the bracket this year.
Well, they've got 2 huge opportunities coming up. Wednesday at Texas A&M, Saturday at home against Missouri. We know how Jekyll and Hyde Vandy's been home versus on the road. That would make up for a lot of those road losses. A win at a top 10 Texas A&M team Wednesday night, and then Missouri coming home. So Tennessee is currently the 4th seed in the SEC. They're tied with Missouri at 9-5. Tennessee has the head-to-head over Mizzou and a chance to play Alabama, who's currently the 3 seed on Saturday. And yeah, like you said, Vanderbilt 1 game back of Kentucky in the SEC standings.
All right. So a fun weekend of basketball. It will also be a fun week of basketball as we get closer and closer to the conference tournament. SEC, a dogfight as always, so we'll keep tabs on that with Vandy and Tennessee as we move forward. Coming up next, the Jaguars. They finally hired a general manager. He appears to be Jackson's age. He looks 25. We'll talk about whether or not the Jags have made the right decision and how competitive we actually expect this year's AFC South to be. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 10:59. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. It is NFL Scouting Combine Week in Indianapolis. Both Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi will meet with Titans media tomorrow, including 104.5 The Zone. Meanwhile, quarterback prospect Shedeur Sanders will not be working out at Lucas Oil Stadium, choosing to focus on his interviews with teams, according to Ian Rappaport. Also, Tom Pelissero adding that it's uncertain whether Cam Ward will throw at the Combine, but Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart, Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe, and Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard certainly will throw at Lucas Oil Stadium. Rams quarterback Matt Stafford will be in Indy this week with permission from the Rams to speak with other teams. Also, according to Pelissero, it is not a trade request from Stafford, but an opportunity for both the Rams and Stafford to gauge his value outside of Los Angeles. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Heading up to Indianapolis later today. NFL Combine gets started in earnest tomorrow. Titans holding court with the number one overall pick. Should be an interesting time. At the very least, Lucas and Jackson are going to hold it down here the rest of the week. I will join you from Indy Tuesday through Friday. We've got Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi on the show tomorrow, and there are a great many questions I have to ask both of these gentlemen about the future of their franchise. Speaking of future of the franchise, what do you think? So teams that have struggled of late and are struggling even more so to give their fan bases a reason to get excited. The first team that comes to mind, the first club that comes to mind is the Cowboys to me. But the Jags have to be up there somewhere, right? You have a team that features a number one overall pick at quarterback, number one overall pick on the defensive line. You clear out the coach and the general manager, but obviously the Trent Baalke saga went well into the offseason before they finally determined that they needed to fire Trent Baalke in order to hire a new coach because nobody wanted to work with him. And apparently everybody in the world knew that except for Shad Khan, who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so over the weekend, it was announced that they are going to hire James Gladstone, the Rams director of scouting, to be their next general manager, and his introductory press conference is scheduled for at some point today, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's who he's going to be paired with. That, of course, is Liam Cohen, the new Jags head coach. Cringy introductory press conference, and we'll see what results that bears itself out, but there's no question that his resume in rehabilitating or improving quarterback play is top-notch. And Trevor Lawrence is, arguably, is Trevor Lawrence the most underachieving player relative to expectation in professional football right now?
Active player?
Active player.
Yes.
He's a number one overall pick
Yes.
at quarterback. He's on a huge second contract, and he's had one playoff win that really should be noted as a Chargers loss as opposed to a Jaguars win.
I think Deshaun Watson should be up there relative to his contract with Cleveland. But yeah, no doubt, with how Lawrence was talked about as a prospect, if you showed anybody, if you explained the early returns of his first 3 or 4 seasons to somebody, if you could go, into the future and then come back and lay that out for somebody the day before he's drafted, they'd say, yeah, that's pretty disappointing. So no doubt about that. I wonder if Liam Cohen will be asked to do the Duval thing again when he speaks in Indy this week. Curious to see how he handles that stuff when, Indianapolis a lot of times is the lowest common denominator of media member, right?
Oh, no, it's on a scale of lowest common denominator media stuff, it's Super Bowl media night, number one, because that's like everybody, and they're dressed in ballerina tutus, and people are asking Travis Kelce if he's going to get engaged to Taylor Swift and stuff like that. And then the Indianapolis media scrum podium session.
Yeah, when the first question for every player is, did you talk to the Rams? Did you talk to the Giants? Did you talk to the Raiders?
It's the worst.
They're talking to everybody. Please. I digress.
Lucas never wants to go back to the combine after the 1 year he went.
I was disgusted.
I tried to warn you. Like, I don't know why you don't believe me that the vast majority of NFL media doesn't watch college football.
The tone that he talks about his experience at the NFL Combine with is pure disgust.
It was eye-opening. I felt aligned because Josh Pate had similar disdain for the way people were talking about the sport of college football in general in Indy, because he's there with CBS.
Well, it was funny because they weren't talking about the sport of college football at all. They were just talking about the NFL and how these college football players, aren't you so excited to be at the NFL when you're going to be playing in front of significantly lesser crowds and significantly less excited crowds.
And in some cases, now, being paid less when you get drafted.
Yeah.
Carson Beck could be making less money when he is in the NFL a year from now than he will be making at Miami this year.
It's true.
It's crazy.
Well, he's too busy trying to track down his 2 stolen vehicles.
Yes,
and apparently his the Cavender that he dates, one of the 2 Cavender twins that he dates, also had a vehicle stolen in South Florida over the week.
This was interesting in the ESPN report about the Jags hiring James Gladstone from the Rams personnel executive, as their new GM. At the end of this article by Michael DeRocco, the ESPN Jags reporter, he says Baalke's presence, Trent Baalke, was not the primary reason that Liam Cohen had declined an in-person interview initially, but it played a role, according to multiple Jaguar sources. Cohen spent the day in Jacksonville, and the two sides eventually agreed to a deal late that night. I look at that like, really? You sure?
Well, maybe he didn't know. Right? And then somebody called him and said, "Really? You're going to go work for Trent Baalke?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, never mind. I'm not going to do this. Let me take my extension, my fat extension with the Bucs and move on with my day."
34 years old, James Gladstone. Do you know who the youngest GM hire in NFL history is?
Oh. Is he younger than 34?
Andrew Berry was 32 when the Browns hired him in 2020.
Oh my God. That makes me feel so unaccomplished.
Gladstone will be the youngest active GM, but he will not be the youngest hire. Yeah.
Well, think about this. I wonder if they're not the youngest average age from head coach, GM, and the 2 coordinators, because Gladstone's 34, Cohen is 39. Their OC, what's his first name? Udinsky is his last name. I need to find it.
Oh, he's like 29?
He's 29. He's 29, and then the defensive coordinator is the senior member of the staff. He's 42. So and by the way, all of them, because Tennessee just went through this with very poor results, all of them are doing their jobs for the very first time. In fact, Tennessee technically had a general manager who was 1 year into the job by the time everybody else came in their first years as defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, head coach, and play caller, all these different things. Jacksonville's going to reset the board across the board with people who have never done these jobs before.
Yeah, including Tony Baselli, who has a front office role with the Jags now, too. It's already the youngest head coaching division in the NFL. There's not a coach older than the age of 40 right now in the AFC South. And you add a 34-year-old general manager to the mix.
So what we know about, how appealing is the Jags' job, and how much work do they have? Just to run it through the Titans' perspective, how big a threat is Jacksonville actually? It's really tough for me to determine that right now, because I'm going into 2025, and I understand that this is pre-free agency, it's pre-draft, it's pre a lot of very important things that will help influence and impact my feeling on this particular team. But I am entering 2025 assuming that the Titans are going to be the team with the longest odds to win the division, because they still don't have a definitive quarterback answer. And for whatever Trevor Lawrence is, he is definitively their quarterback.
Yeah, and the Colts don't have that either. Anthony Richardson is a huge question mark, but their overall roster is better and more talented than the Titans.
I have an expectation that the Jags should be I think the Jags should be better than the Colts next year, because Anthony Richardson is a mess. And while that's still good enough for Indianapolis to mess around and win, how many games they win last year? 6, 7 in 2024? I don't remember off the top of my head. It was good enough for second place.
The Colts?
Yeah.
They were 8-9.
8-9.
Yeah, they were almost 500.
Okay, so the Colts, maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, or Shane Steichen enough credit at that point in time, but the division is gettable. And there's a lot of teams with significant questions outside the Texans, and even the Texans are coming in with significant questions after C.J. Stroud takes a step back in 2024. They fire their offensive coordinator. Everybody else is trying to figure out how to get out of the basement of the worst division in football. The Jags, to me, should be competing for a wild card spot at minimum.
Oh, yeah. That will be the expectation with a quarterback under that kind of contract. You got to think that's an appealing part of the job for Liam Cohen, is to get to work with Trevor Lawrence. No matter how disappointing it's been over the last 3 years, the talent profile is enough to attract a quality head coaching candidate on the offensive side of the ball.
You're going to look around and say, you see what I did with Will Levis in college? Watch this.
And we talked about the amount of swings John Robinson got in that 2016 draft, 10 draft picks, and there were certainly misses, but there were also franchise-changing players. Jags have swings in this draft. They have the most draft picks in the 2025 NFL draft. They have 10. They have 2 3s, 2 4s, and 2 6s. And picking number 5 overall.
So we will see what becomes of the youth movement in Jacksonville. It's one of the more curious case studies in the NFL this year. I mean, the AFC South is just weird, right? I came in so optimistic about the entire division last year, and all of them, really. I don't think there was a team that did not disappoint in some form or fashion, even if you were just kind of looking at it saying, all right, Richardson and Levis, Stroud in year 2, Lawrence, the most seasoned of them, but I don't really know about Trevor Lawrence. Like, all 4 of them underwhelmed.
Yeah, they did. CJ Stroud was a trendy MVP pick before the season to take a year 2 jump and be in that discussion. So, yeah, that's a fair statement. They all showed some level of disappointment. That also depends on how highly you thought of Anthony Richardson, right? A lot of people also were not very surprised that Anthony Richardson was not ready to carry the Colts in year 2. And that's an interesting situation over there. I have no idea what the future of the Colts quarterback position looks like with Anthony Richardson, and the Colts currently picking 14th in this draft.
Who has the most interesting offseason in the AFC South?
That's a good question.
The easy answer is to say the Texans. They're obviously at the top of the heap. The heap is not, hard to get over the top of, but you understand.
No, I think it's the Titans. And I don't think that's just because we're in Tennessee. I think it's the Titans because it's the team with the blankest slate in terms of the roster and a new GM in place and the number 1 overall pick with the amount of options they have with the number 1 overall pick. Nobody would be blown away if the Titans took a quarterback, number 1 overall. Nobody would be blown away if they traded back to acquire capital. There are a lot of possibilities for them in this draft. So for me, it's the Titans, I think, have the most pivotal offseason in building the future of their franchise in the AFC South.
Well, in building the future of their franchise, but let's take it heading into 2025. I don't think they have the most into 2025 because my 2025 expectations for the Titans are, all right, let's just see.
Yeah, okay.
Just watch.
If you're just keeping it to 2025, I say the Colts.
To me, it's the Colts. Yeah. Because the Richardson thing, I did not realize that they were 8-9 last year. The Colts are the most fascinating of any of these because Chris Ballard, still is employed as the Colts general manager. They have never won the division as long as he's been there for 9 years. It's crazy, the level of longevity. And, he's clearly putting together solid football teams, but the biggest thing that is contingent upon is the former number 4 overall pick in the NFL draft, Anthony Richardson, panning out. And to your point, I have no earthly idea what the hell is going to become of Anthony Richardson. And as an extension, what will then happen with Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard? Because if Richardson doesn't pan out, I don't know, maybe you don't hang that around Steichen's neck, but you sure as hell put it on Ballard. He cannot survive another year. I've been saying this. I've been saying this.
You got to think he can't survive another quarterback, right? I mean, after the Luck thing.
Buddy, I don't know. How many quarterbacks have they had since Luck? It's like Broncos level post-Manning.
Yeah. Well, he was given this runway after Luck that you understand the position he was put in. Yeah. And he took some, I'd say, conservative swings, right? Like Matt Ryan, you thought was going to be. It didn't carry the risk that someone like Richardson does.
No, that's probably the worst opinion I've ever had is that Matt Ryan was going to be the quarterback of the division that year, and he was awful.
Phillip Rivers, you thought could be, just kind of a good, stable option, and he was.
Got him to the playoffs.
That's what you thought you would have in Matt Ryan. I don't know if that's what you thought about Carson Wentz, but he was a veteran starter that you brought in, hoping he could stabilize things. And then they course-corrected and went for the riskiest prospect imaginable in Anthony Richardson, the highest upside guy with the smallest amount of sample size from his college tape. And none of them have really panned out. The most successful in that chain of quarterbacks was Rivers. And that was at this point.
Oh, yeah.
2020? That was COVID year?
Was that the first Rivers year? Because didn't he have 2?
He did. Yeah, you're right. So, yeah, I mean, that was 5 years ago.
I think it was 2020 and 2021 was Phil Rivers with the Colts.
So if this continues with Richardson, then I don't see how Ballard can survive.
Maybe it is the luck retirement factor that you're like, all right, Chris, like we understand that this was not.
Yeah,
that was not the plans
6 years ago at this point.
Oh yeah.
How many seasons do you get after an owner has to put out a statement to announce he's retaining you? Right, like
I guess it depends.
Like
on
to
the
me,
owner.
I mean, Jim Irsay had.
I don't know what Jim Irsay is going to do at any given point.
If you have to put out a statement to announce the retention of a coach or GM, then there's probably some pressure on said coach or GM, and they probably have 1, maybe 2 seasons to figure it out.
Yeah, that feels. I mean, that feels right. But again, Indianapolis is such a perplexing circumstance to me. Heading into this specific season. Again, I know that the Titans' long-term implications of this offseason are fascinating, and of course we will document those at length. But for the division in 2025, I don't know. A lot of these teams, all of these teams, have a great deal of stuff to figure out. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to chime in, if you want to talk quarterbacks, if you want to talk about these teams' respective off seasons. We'll take your phone calls on this coming up next and also cover the University of Tennessee attendees at this week's NFL Scouting Combine. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. You guys know I love Two Rivers Ford. I've been a Two Rivers Ford customer for over a decade at this point. And just like Two Rivers and the customer service that they offer, they have been offering that level of award-winning customer service to their customers for over 4 decades here in Middle Tennessee. And they have an excellent offer for you because it's Truck Month at Two Rivers Ford. And they have over 200 F-150s priced at Truck Month savings and ready to roll. And if you haven't heard about Two Rivers Ford, they're one of the biggest Ford dealers in the nation right here in Middle Tennessee. They're locally owned, and they are a non-commissioned sales team, so you can test drive with zero pressure. They're making a paycheck whether they sell you a car that day or not. So now you know it's Truck Month at Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. The song hits home a little more these days. I got too much touch of gray in the beard and the sideburns. It's bothering me. What would you do if I came in with a Ryan Day type of dye job at some point in the next 3 to 5 years?
I wouldn't notice a difference because
Wouldn't be surprised.
You don't have any gray. It would just look the same. It would be something that you would do to appease yourself. You might have like 2 gray hairs, which I do too, and I enjoy them. I enjoy the gray hairs starting to get sprinkled in.
Yeah? A little salt and pepper?
Yeah.
Oh, Megan must like it then.
Who do you
into
think's
that.
going to age more gracefully out of the two of you?
Well, me, because I'm chemically enhanced.
I think it's going to be him.
If age more gracefully, yeah, I think,
I think because you're chemically enhanced,
yeah.
it's going to be Lucas.
Have you
Yeah.
seen Kirby? Kirby also chemically enhanced. Different level of chemicals, but like Kirby's looked the same age my entire life.
I don't know. Oftentimes, the most chemically enhanced individuals look scarier and scarier as they get older. I think that's where you're headed.
It's what's the movie with Kevin? Is it Kevin Nealon in it, where he's done too much Botox with Adam
Yep.
Sandler?
Yep.
Is it?
I think it's the one, the Jennifer Aniston, Brooklyn Decker one. Just go with it.
Just go with it.
When they're all in Hawaii or something.
So funny. He's trying to
drink and the water's just falling out of his mouth. Oh, no. Yeah, that is what I picture you.
Buck Rising, circa 2055.
God willing.
If you consider that,
he looks great. Kevin Nealon looks great. He may not be able to drink liquid smoothly, but he looks great. All right. So speaking of looking great, the Vols, they are looking. So do you know how many draft picks that Tennessee has had under Josh Heupel to date?
Ooh. Total number of draft picks?
Take a guess.
I'm going to guess, let's see, that'd be 3 drafts? 21, 22, 23, 4 drafts. No, it would be 3.
Over the past 3 years.
Yes. I'm going to say 12?
13. 13. Look at you. So they're looking to add to their draft profile as a means of, it's always good to recruit, and you can recruit on a great many things, but certainly your ability, your program's ability, your coach's ability to get players from one level to the next level, even if they're making more money at the college level for some of them, is a huge selling point for a program, and it's something that Heupel is looking to improve upon because they have, if I'm not mistaken, by my count, 6 players who will be in attendance at this, who are invited to this year's Indianapolis NFL Scouting Combine. Out of the 329 invited players, 6 attended the University of Tennessee. You got 2 wide receivers in Brew McCoy and Dante Thornton. You got running back Dylan Sampson, one of the youngest prospects in this year's draft class, and then a handful of defensive linemen in James Pierce, Omar Norman Lott, and Elijah Simmons. So those are the 6 combine invitees for the Vols this year. How many of them get drafted is going to be an interesting discussion because we know James Pierce is going to be a day one or at very worst, unless he's got an attitude that none of us know about. I know he's never really been media available to determine the personality.
He's a bit of a wild card in that regard. I have no idea what James Pierce Jr. is like in a room in front of people. I don't know how he will be speaking with teams. You know, if you covered Tennessee and you were boots on the ground in Knoxville, you were probably around him from time to time, but you didn't really speak to him. And I was listening to the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays, and he had Dane Brugler on, who we had on a few weeks ago, the athletics draft expert. And Brugler said he's hearing, whispers from teams about character concerns around James Pierce Jr. It's Lion season. You take everything with a massive grain of salt. But I will say Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network left James Pierce Jr. out of his latest mock draft in the first round.
Oh.
And Pierce,
that's pretty damning because pass rusher.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not, he didn't have a section for players he left out on saying why he left them out.
What, like outside looking in?
Right. Yeah, he didn't have that. But, I'd put stock in that. Daniel Jeremiah, he's not throwing darts at a dartboard. He talks to teams, and clearly he didn't think James Pierce Jr. would be in the first round with his latest mock draft. So I'm fascinated at how he will handle himself. He should crush in terms of the testing. He's crazy athletic. I feel like edge rusher is a position where the testing is important when you feel like you actually can learn something about these prospects. So I think he'll knock that out of the park. But I'm not going to sit here and say that the guy has bad character because I don't know, but I don't know anything about him.
We don't know anything.
I've never heard him speak. So that's why I think
which is telling to some extent, right?
Right.
Like I know media is not a thing really with the college football players, with the collegiate athletes. Like it's much, much more managed.
No, that is telling. Josh Heupel is not Nick Saban, right? Josh Heupel did not have the policy of players don't speak to media. Players spoke to media all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. James Pierce Jr. didn't. Not one time at Tennessee. So I don't know how that bodes for him in Indianapolis, but given
Come on up to the podium and we'll just throw a bunch of questions at you like, did you meet with the Raiders? What was it like? Was it an official meeting or an unofficial meeting? And if he can't answer those, then he's banged.
Of all the Tennessee players at the podium this week, he's the one I'm by far the most interested in.
Well, yeah, if you haven't heard him talk, then obviously so. And they, sometimes things can happen to where these players are scheduled for combine media interviews and don't end up making the combine media interviews. Obviously, an extreme example of that is Jalen Carter. Didn't that break? You were at that combine that year. Didn't that break like 15 minutes before he was scheduled to go to the podium that year and then ultimately did not make his media appearance for obvious legal reasons?
Yes, the DUI, the hit and run incident. after the celebration, the national championship celebration at Georgia.
Yeah. So within the scope of the position groups that we have, running back is going to be a popular talking point this week and this year, not necessarily for the Tennessee Titans, but for the class as a whole. There's a lot of talented running backs. Speaking of which, Ashton Jeanty, that report just came out that he will also not work out at the Combine this week. He is a projected top 10 pick. There's not necessarily a reason for him to do so. We'll talk about this within the context of Shedeur Sanders a little later. Cam Ward, last I checked, was still undecided as far as at least some level of participation in drills. But Ashton Jeanty and Shedeur Sanders, two of the highest profile prospects that will not be participating in Combine workouts at all. They will obviously do the media, they will do the physicals, and move on about their day. But the running back class is fascinating. So you'll know the answer to this better than I, because Dylan Sampson is an ascending player. He's a young player, which works in his favor because teams could potentially take a crack at upside. But like him compared to, in a weak running back class last year, Jalen Wright. These are two different players. What does Dylan Sampson bring to the table that Wright might necessarily not have, and what does Dylan Sampson lack that Jalen Wright had in spades beyond the obvious, the speed?
Yeah, the speed is the obvious. I think Sampson's probably a tougher runner between the tackles. He carried a much bigger workload than Jalen Wright last year, which I guess could go one or two ways, right? You could think there's too much tread on the tires, or you can look at his availability as a plus for last year, although he obviously missed the majority of that college football playoff game with a hamstring. Sampson dealt with stuff all year long, as anybody does, but right before that Ohio State game, he said he was feeling the best he's felt all year. Then he played like 2 snaps, had 2 carries, and he's out in the freezing cold dealing with a hamstring issue. So I'm sure he'll get questions about that. Pass protection is a bit of a question mark for Sampson. And this is a thing with most Tennessee running backs. They don't really utilize the running backs as a pass-catching option very consistently in this offense. So those are two things that Sampson has not really proved he can do at an NFL level: pass protection and catching the ball out of the backfield. He seems to be pretty middle of the pack in terms of the running back class,
which is not bad.
Yeah,
it's a good,
it's a really
good class. Like Jeanty, Omarion Hampton, Cam Scatabo, Dylan Sampson, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. Like, there's a ton of running backs here that are accomplished that will be in attendance in Indianapolis this week. Trevor Etienne, another player that's going to be in attendance. It's going to be a fascinating situation to see how teams address that relative to last year, where the veterans were the better value, essentially, even if you had to pay a little more for running backs last year on the open market. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, obviously we've talked about that. Tony Pollard, a great deal. This is not the same. It's a weaker running back free agency, which means the draft class, you'll probably, Genty's the only first-round pick.
Yeah.
I think.
Probably. Also, the fumbles were an issue for Dylan Sampson in 2024. So his testing could be important. For Tennessee's side of things, the wide receiver position feels important, and it's not that Brew McCoy or Dante Thornton will be day 1 or even day 2 picks. I'm not really sure where they project at the moment, Thornton and McCoy, but I feel like Tennessee needs a receiver to hit in the NFL. It hasn't happened with Jalen Hyatt.
Well, is that his fault, or
no?
Is that Daniel
there's a
Jones'
ton of variables there. It did start to pick up a little bit with Cedric Tillman. Tillman quietly had a decently productive season with the Browns last year. It certainly didn't happen with Velus Jones Jr. That felt like a really good opportunity coming out of that Tennessee offense. Cedric Tillman this past year, 339 yards, 3 touchdowns. So he had a couple nice games for the Browns, and they've obviously had their share of quarterback issues. But Tennessee needs a wide receiver to hit in the NFL. If it's not going to be a quarterback, and it doesn't look like that's going to be Hendon Hooker anytime soon, it would only help them down the road in recruiting and bringing players to play that position at Tennessee, where the NIL money helps, but a sample size of NFL talent, you could argue, helps just as much. And they have that in certain positions. Ironically, it's been, the defensive guys that have sort of flashed for Tennessee in the NFL. Byron Young, kind of the latest.
Really good player.
They've got a chance to get a couple more in the league with James Pierce Jr. and Omar Norman-Lott, who really flashed during Senior Bowl. Coaches and analysts left feeling really good about Omar Norman-Lott after Mobile.
So, Jael brings up
Josh Palmer, but he didn't play for Josh Heupel.
Yeah, this is we're talking about Heupel era Tennessee right now. And again, this is just one outlet, but the highest rating on a Tennessee wide receiver between the two of them, according to Pro Football Focus's big board, which our buddy Trevor Sikkema has a great deal to do with. He is currently the 221st overall prospect, Dante Thornton. You have to go to the third page of wide receiver prospects, or excuse me, the top of the second page of wide receiver prospects to get to Thornton. He's sandwiched right now between Samuel Brown out of Miami and Will Shepard from Colorado. If you scroll down, Brew McCoy is 268 overall of NFL prospects, and he obviously further down the list. Thornton has the height advantage, certainly, and the speed advantage.
Yeah, big play guy. McCoy, I don't think, did a ton to help himself at Senior Bowl. He's just a guy that really looks the part.
Yeah.
But
if he makes it, he's gonna have to cut his teeth on special teams.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Jacob Scott tweets at us and says, going out on a limb and saying some reporter is mad that he doesn't do media, talking about James Pierce Jr., and that's where the negativity towards Pierce is coming from. Quote, he won't talk to me. He's a problem.
Okay, that's not how that works.
Yeah, no, I think this is,
it's not like there's an option. So in the NFL, that's a thing, right? A player can, technically they're supposed to talk to you because it's in the television contract, which is how they make the bulk of their money. But if I go up to, we'll just use Jeff for an example, if Jeff and I have a bad day and he don't want to talk to me the next day or something like that, Jeff is allowed to do that. Now, would I let that color my commentary afterwards? You guys can determine that because we've had an incident like that. I think we did okay. In college, the organization, the program, has to make the player available. Yeah. So it's not like the media, the player cannot decline the media. The program has to make the player available to media. This is a program. So if they had any angst towards not being able to talk to James Pierce during his Tennessee career, it would be directed at the sports information director or Josh Heupel as opposed to James Pierce.
It's not nothing that they never rolled him out there. James Pierce Jr., go look up mock drafts before the start of the 2024 season. How many mock drafts had James Pierce Jr. as the number 1 overall pick?
Oh, just heading into training camp last year. I remember you and Cosell talking about it.
Yeah, there were multiple that had the Titans taking him in the top 5. And now they're talking about him maybe being dropped out of the first round entirely. But the point is, Tennessee was going into the 2024 season with a potential number 1 overall pick on their roster, the biggest name on that defense, and at no point made him available to speak to media when tons of other defensive leaders on both sides of the ball are speaking all the time. Heupel's not shy about rolling players out there to talk to the media. And Nico Iamaleava spoke to the media almost every week. So, yeah, it's not nothing to me that they just chose, whether it was in James Pierce Jr.'s interest, in the program's best interest, or both, to never roll him out there.
See, it's not just me caping up for my fellow media vultures. Lucas is taking our side this time. How's it feel?
Dirty.
But I get it. People generally, no matter what area of coverage it is, whether it be sports, politics, local news, or whatever, people don't like the media, and I understand that. So you might infer, based on your feelings of the media, something about that. And by the way, that stuff happens. You're not wrong. I'm not to say that doesn't exist would be ignorant. But I think in this specific situation, you have to pay attention to what the program is doing in their management of this player, and then it's reasonable to then ask the question: okay, why? Why was this the tact taken? And frankly, assuming that am I going to be able to attend his media availability? I need to look at the schedule. I think defensive line is the first day, so I would be able to talk to James Pierce. I think, provided that that's not going on during the show, I would like to go over and ask him, hey, why did you not get the opportunity to be in front of media as a college player? What was the logic behind that for you in the program?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question. And for what it's worth, I mentioned Daniel Jeremiah dropped him out of his mock draft in the first round. He has the Titans taking Abdul Carter with the number 1 overall pick in his latest mock draft that came out a little less than a week ago. So Carter has entirely replaced James Pierce Jr. as the number 1 pass rushing prospect in this draft. And that's in large part because Abdul Carter exploded in 2024, had a massively productive year, played his best football at the end of the year in the college football playoff. James Pierce Jr.'s production dropped off a little bit. Pressures, hurries, all of those things still very much up there. But, yeah, Carter just raced by him in this process, and that's who Jeremiah has picking number 1 overall, where back in August, that easily could have been James Pierce Jr. in a mock draft.
615-737-1045 is the number if you want to get involved ahead of the NFL Combine. Taylor H says, nah, Buck, even if it's during the show, go ask that. I mean, we have the flexibility to do that because Lucas is going to be here in studio. So, yeah, that's probably important enough. Like if James Pierce ends up timing out that it's during the show, and provided that we don't have an interview of significance that I have to be there for, then yes, I would probably take that time to go scurry away and leave you two to your own devices.
He is by far the most high-profile prospect to come out of Tennessee in this draft. I was pretty surprised that Cooper Mays did not catch an invite to the Combine. A guy that's played as much football as he has at center, who has the size and was a finalist for the Remington Trophy. Goes to the best center in college football. So I was a little bit surprised. I know the interior of the offensive line in general is pretty deep in this draft, but I was slightly surprised.
How much do you think injuries played into that?
Maybe. I mean, he's dealt with stuff, but he really didn't miss any time this past year.
I don't think it's that deep because it's like, again, I'm just reading far more credible draft analysts than myself on this information, but it's not necessarily regarded as a top tier center class. So if there was, if he was regarded as a viable prospect, as a draftable prospect, I think he would be there.
He was one of the best centers in college football last year, so I thought that was interesting.
All right, coming up next, Shedeur Sanders, obviously a person of importance or of note to Tennessee Titans fans and the rest of the NFL for a bunch of different reasons. He has made a declaration of what he will or will not do at the NFL Combine, and we'll talk about how we feel about that coming up next. Welcome back to the show. Fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Combine coverage is just a few hours away before we get rolling for Indianapolis and head on up there to give you all the sights and sounds from the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine. Expected to stay in Indy for 2 more years after this one, which is exciting for everybody who's involved with this thing. I don't know how fans feel about that because they have turned it into more of a fan event. Like, all right, at the highest heights of your sports fandom where you are skipping school for National Signing Day, is there anything about the NFL Scouting Combine, given that there are college football players there, that would entice you to go watch drills? Because that's why they've moved a lot of the drills to the weekend. They let fans into Lucas Oil in the stands. They're trying to turn a combine into an event like the draft where you have a fan experience and you move this thing around. I hope they never move it, but they're trying to. And I think even the fan experience is best served in Indianapolis.
I never would have been interested in that necessarily.
It's not football,
even,
right?
Yeah.
It's just sprints
they're not playing football.
Bench presses.
Signing day was different. Signing day was like the draft for a college football fan.
Sure.
This is your team now, and this is going to be your team in the next 2-3 years. The current state of college athletics has obviously lessened the impact of that, where it's like, yeah, this is your team now for the next 5 minutes, and these guys could be playing for, BYU next season. Who knows? But no, I don't think I ever would have been interested in going up to Indianapolis to go watch, dudes running 40s in their underwear. You'd have on NFL Network during that process. But again, the most important things that happen in Indy are the things that we do not get to see or hear.
So that will be the thing that Shedeur Sanders is there to do, because he will not participate for the fans in any of the combine drills at this point in time, or at least that is the latest reporting on the Colorado quarterback. Last we have seen, perhaps things will change at some point throughout the course of the day, but Cam Ward is undecided as to his level of participation in combine drills. But Shedeur has made the decision to not participate, will not work out for teams this week. He will meet with teams, of course, just as he did at the Shrine Bowl. A little different. His attendance at the Shrine Bowl, I think, was to help shed a light on some of his other teammates that were actually playing in the Shrine, practicing in the Shrine Bowl practices, and then ultimately ended up playing in the game.
Yeah, but nobody knew he wasn't going to participate until he didn't participate, right? Like, he didn't commit to the Shrine Bowl with an asterisk of, I'm not going to practice. I'm just going to go hang out.
Not a public one. Maybe there was a private kind of like handshake. Hey, yeah, I'll show up at the Shrine Bowl this year, but let's just do the media.
Maybe, but we were under the impression. I mean, the Titans had an assistant wide receivers coach there coaching quarterbacks for his team, and we were sitting here saying, he's going to get to coach Shedeur Sanders, and he didn't.
Now, the team with the number 1 overall pick is going to have a large contingent at all of these things because they have to, right? They had a bunch of people. They had one of the largest traveling parties at the Senior Bowl. They had one of the largest traveling parties at the Shrine Bowl. They have the number 1 overall pick. They have to have as many people involved in this process as humanly possible because they got to get it right. But for Shedeur, this is just the interesting thing about Shedeur is, to me, I am completely fine with players at the combine who don't want to participate in the drills. Like, if you have solidified yourself as a first-round pick and you're like, the only thing that could happen here is I could hurt my draft stock, because it's like the first day of Senior Bowl or first day of Shrine Bowl. Like, these players, these quarterbacks don't know these wide receivers. These wide receivers don't know these quarterbacks. Like, it can look a little disjointed. And unlike Senior Bowl, there's not 3 days to do this. It's just one day where you're out there running drills and you got to get it right and you got to look good because it's going to be nationally broadcast, and then it can impact the narrative if you look out of sync with wide receivers that you've never practiced with before. But is Shedeur definitively a first-round pick this year because of the lack of volume of potential first-round picks at quarterback?
It would be very surprising.
Cosell's talking about him as a day 2 guy.
It would be just in terms of what he would be in any other year. Like, that's not taking into account the current quarterback class.
The quality of the player is that of a second-round pick.
Okay, yes. And that's a pretty prevailing opinion on Shedeur Sanders. It'd be pretty surprising if he fell all the way out of the first round, but it wouldn't be terribly shocking if
he has a Will Levis moment. I would be surprised.
Yeah, dropping all. I guess because of the quantity of quarterbacks,
right,
that would be surprising. But let's say the Titans trade out because the Giants really want to go up and get Cam Ward. And the Browns, sitting there at 2, don't think enough of Shedeur Sanders to draft him to make him the franchise quarterback at number 2 overall, and they take Abdul Carter. They're like, oh, we're about to have to trade Myles Garrett, so let's take the best defensive player. And then the Patriots take Travis Hunter, and the Jags take a tackle. I don't know who Jacksonville is projected to be looking at with the 5th overall pick. But then let's say he gets down to, because there are 2 pretty pivotal sort of hinge points in the top 10 at the quarterback position, Vegas, the Jets, and potentially the Saints, depending on what they do with Derek Carr.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets past those, you could see a free fall.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, there are too many teams. Like, I think he's going to go in the first round because it's not like a super interesting quarterback cycle, like as far as the names, but there's a lot of teams that have an unsettled situation at quarterback moving into 2025. So my point with that is, because I'm not saying that he won't be a first-round pick or anything like that. I fully expect him to be a first-round pick because the teams have the need there. But I also expected Will Levis to be a first-round pick. That was the expectation of the vast majority of people outside of NFL buildings putting together NFL draft boards. And then he fell out of the first round. He could have very well, had the Vikings and the Titans done that trade, that would have put the Titans back into the first round. Will Levis could have been a first-round pick. But is Sanders capable of having that kind of fall? Because a lot of people would not grade him as a first-round talent. Now, you could have 32 first-round picks and have 15 guys with a first-round grade in any given year. Half of the first round is usually about where the tipping point is before the talent becomes pretty similar, right? The back half of the first round and the top of the second round are not drastically different in terms of the players that are there. It's just the paycheck, obviously, changes significantly from first round to second round. I'm so interested to see what happens to him because he could be the third pick. He could be, he could be the first pick for all I know. He could be the top of the second. He could free fall. I genuinely don't know what to do with him.
Duck Falling says, last week Shedeur was a top 5 pick. This week he's a day 2 pick. Y'all can't think for yourselves. But that's just how wide-ranging the possibilities are for Shedeur Sanders in this draft specifically. He could be a top 5 pick because there are multiple QB-needy teams, and there's not a lot of high-level quarterbacks at the top of this draft. He could also be a day 2 pick because almost by consensus, Shedeur Sanders is not one of the 32 best players in this draft overall.
And again, to the point about y'all can't think for yourselves. No, I'm very happy to not. I'll watch the games, I'll watch the players, but I am not a draft analyst. Like we will bring on draft analysts. We have Cosell. He's an incredible resource. Obviously, we'll talk to the Titans GM tomorrow on the radio show. You can't be an expert at anything or at everything at anything. That's like the Philadelphia Eagles, the mayor of Philadelphia saying, you can come together and lose or come together, whatever she said, whatever she misspoke. But I would prefer to outsource.
She said nothing is possible.
Nothing is possible.
When we work together.
Which should be the mantra. Let's put that on T-shirts and make that the theme of the show. I would prefer to outsource something as vast as draft analysis to the people who do it every day. So you are correct. I would prefer to have guided experience help me through the draft process and then to relay that to you. That's the most effective way. Delegating. It's like any good business. You have to make sure you understand your strengths and your weaknesses so that you can bring the best possible product to the table. So that's what we're trying to do for you. And I understand that there will be some variance throughout the course of this. That's the case every draft cycle. How many of us thought that there would be only one first-round pick at quarterback in 2022? And that was a significantly worse quarterback class. But even then, that kind of stretched belief, right? Because there were still teams that needed quarterbacks. Pickett was the only one that went in the first round. Another one didn't go until the third round with Ritter and Willis. And Purdy at the very last pick of the draft. I understand that that's the saving grace of 2022. But still, these things can happen. Do not marry yourself to any set level of expectation. The draft is wild and entertaining for that reason, because you don't know what to expect, because you don't know what's on these teams' boards. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. We'd be happy to have you. There's some new information on Matt Stafford. It's relevant to the Titans. We'll tell you what it is coming up next.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon from the 104.5 The Zone studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The NFL Scouting Combine is this week in Indianapolis. Both Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi meet with Titans media tomorrow, including 104.5 The Zone. Quarterback prospect Shedeur Sanders will not be working out at Lucas Oil Stadium, choosing to focus on his interviews with teams, according to Ian Rappaport. Cam Ward, uncertain, according to Tom Pelissero, on whether or not he will throw at the Combine. Meanwhile, Rams quarterback Matt Stafford will be in Indianapolis. He has permission from the LA Rams to speak with other teams, according to NFL Network. It is not a trade request from Stafford, but rather an opportunity for both sides to gauge his value outside of LA. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour on this Monday. Show's moving quickly. We're having a great time. I told Lucas and Jackson it feels like football season because it kind of is. We got 2 weeks off. Now we're right back in the mix, and the Titans are on the clock. Combine coverage is going to be a blast. We're looking forward to getting up there later tonight and getting you all the information that we are able to get for you. And we look forward to having Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi on the radio show tomorrow. Borgonzi right now is scheduled for 10:30 a.m. Central Time. We are going to catch Callahan before the radio show starts, and we will give that to you, provided that our timelines line up around 12:20 tomorrow, so you can look forward to those two interviews. If you are not able to be by the radio when those two things occur, you can subscribe to the podcast or 104.5 The Zone's YouTube channel, where they will be available digitally on demand. As we look at all the different things that are going to be talked about this week in Indianapolis, one of them is Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is going to be in Indy this week because he and his representation are going to meet with the Los Angeles Rams contingent about trying to figure out the future for Matt Stafford. Now, that's a quarterback domino that does not necessarily have a direct impact on the Titans right now, but could impact the way that the rest of the quarterback market falls, which of course would impact the Titans. So as Stafford currently sits at, do you know what he stands to make in 2025? It's really cost effective. He's on the books for $27 million.
It is cost effective in 2025, not so much for 26.
Well, and he's also looking for more money. Because if Dak Prescott is making an average annual value of $60 million a year, what is Super Bowl champion Matt Stafford worth? Because Stafford is a significantly better player, even at an advanced age. I think he recently turned 37, so I think he would be 37 in the next season. Stafford is still a high-level player.
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, he's better than, there are 9 quarterbacks that are making an average annual value of over $50 million per year. Would you rather have Matt Stafford or Dak Prescott?
Stafford.
Would you rather have Matt Stafford or Jordan Love?
Love just because he's younger.
Matt Stafford or Trevor Lawrence?
Stafford.
Matt Stafford or Jared Goff?
Goff.
Matt Stafford or Jalen Hurts?
Hurts.
Justin Herbert?
Ooh, I think Stafford. I don't know. It's not like Herbert hasn't done anything wrong, but I don't know. He feels like, to me, the next Trevor Lawrence level underachiever. I know he's not a number 1 overall pick, but still, Justin Herbert has not accomplished what one would expect a top quarterback, especially with that talent ceiling that he has, to be able to accomplish. So I'd probably say Stafford.
And the Jordan Love one, you could go either way, especially if you're just talking about for 2025.
I could. I'm really banking on age there.
Yes, for sure. So how much Stafford has left in the tank, we don't know. Again, he's not coming off a major injury. This isn't Rodgers or Cousins coming off an Achilles. He's just had little nicks and bruises over the years and has been banged up. You wonder how much that has built up over time. But, yeah, Matt Stafford probably wants to make in that neighborhood.
Deserves to
of
make.
Average. Absolutely.
Yes. So he is coming off a year last season where he had 3,762 passing yards. He averaged about 235 yards a game, completed 65.8% of his passes, and had 20 touchdowns last year. He had an overall rating on the season of 93.7. He's still a high-level player. You obviously want to make sure he's protected because he doesn't move well or overwhelmingly well. Like he's not a total stiff, but he's certainly less mobile, especially in an advanced age. So you have to have certain things to help him succeed there. But Stafford, as a proposition, this is not something that I expect to be available to other teams to acquire. Now, could a Godfather offer come in and blow the Rams away to the point, essentially force their hand? Like if you get an offer that's so good, so above and beyond for what this 37-year-old quarterback is, then you have to take it no matter what it does to your competitive plans in 2025. Because think about it, NFC West wide open, right?
Yeah.
Niners are not looking as almighty as they have in the last 3 to 4 years. Seahawks, honestly, I'd be curious to see what they end up doing with Geno because they've got some cap stuff that they've got to figure out too. And, we haven't talked about the Seahawks in the quarterback market, but it's a possibility.
He's 34. He'll be 35 in October, and they pick 18th overall this year.
And then there are the Rams that you look at and say, okay, to the point that Lucas made, I think at some point last week, like they were very close to competing in the NFC Championship game.
A play away.
This year. So
from hosting it.
It is something that is going to be fascinating to watch it play out. And the relevance right now is that Tom Pelissero reported over the weekend, or maybe late in the afternoon on Friday, that the Rams had given Stafford's agent permission to essentially speak with other teams, but not in terms of pursuing a trade or a contract, in terms of gauging Matt Stafford's value. So the agent is being given permission to be like, all right, if Matt was available, let's just take, Tennessee. Hey, Mike Borgonzi, if Matt was available, what would the contract offer you would be prepared to make Matt Stafford look like? And then the Rams would take that due diligence and then see how it fits with their current cap construct and decide whether or not they're in that level of market for Matt Stafford or not. Essentially, Matt Stafford is pursuing his value on, I'm not going to call it the open market, but on the market to see what the Rams can give him.
And the Rams want to find out as well.
It sounds like both sides want to make it work, which had some, at least some smoke around it, whether or not the Rams were actually committed to moving forward with Matt Stafford. The newest information, the latest information makes it seem like, yeah, they just want to figure out how much is a reasonable amount to pay a 37-year-old Super Bowl champion. So, to me, that, again, skews the percentages that Matt Stafford is a Ram more likely than not.
More likely than not, he will be an LA Ram, I would agree.
So,
he is under contract still with the Los Angeles Rams for another couple of years.
And that is something that is going to parlay itself into realistic quarterback options for the Titans, which we can get to coming up next. But if you're a Titans fan, let's just say that all things equal, and you're pursuing every quarterback avenue, or at least thinking about every quarterback avenue, are Titans fans interested in Matt Stafford? Should Titans fans have any level of interest should this go another way? Because it's possible that these conversations don't go the way that everybody expects them to, and really do things go off without a hitch.
For a trade, no.
I agree. It does not make sense, even though he is immediately, Matt Stafford would be the best quarterback that the Titans have had. I know McNair is in a different kind of category for the lore that comes with Steve McNair.
He'd be the most accomplished quarterback to put on a Titans uniform. How much of those accomplishments happen in a Titans uniform would be to be determined.
Sure, but I'm saying he would immediately, because I don't want to disparage McNair, but Stafford has a ring.
Yeah.
Steve didn't. This would be the most accomplished quarterback to ever play for the Titans in this era.
It would.
In the Titans era. So,
but in a trade, no.
I, again, am inclined to agree because Aaron Rodgers would also be the most accomplished quarterback to ever put on a Titans uniform, and I would be out on that as well. So you have to take these things in stride. Again, I think it's infinitely more likely that Matt Stafford is with the Los Angeles Rams than not. But for Titans fans who are thinking about it, I know we had some people push back last week, and I kind of got hot about the idea of, what do you want to win now? Like, why are you taking the approach of a win now mindset as a fan, even though I know desperately you just want to win games? Like, you want to have fun watching your football team. Matt Stafford indisputably would make the Titans more fun.
It would be quite the pivot, right, for the Titans to go from draft, develop, retain 30 draft picks in 3 years, 12 top 100 picks in 3 years, and then give up a boatload of draft capital to go get a 37-year-old quarterback who will play behind an offensive line that still has a ton of question marks. It just doesn't feel philosophically like that's where they're headed. There's a difference between that and finding yourself a veteran stopgap quarterback to stabilize things while you build out this roster. So, yeah, in a trade, I would say absolutely not.
Absolutely not. So there is no scenario where you are prepared to think about, because I don't think it would cost you the number 1 pick, obviously, but it might cost you your second. And that right now, without a third.
Yep, you don't have a third.
Don't have a third. Don't have a sixth.
Yeah.
You have 2 sevenths.
And, I mean, again, risk-reward here. Risk-reward. Stafford playing behind this offensive line, injuries that have built up in his career. At what point is he due for a long-term injury at his age? Just things you have to consider. So I feel like there's too much working in the risk category versus the reward category with the current state of this roster for you to pull off a move like that.
Loot on YouTube. You can interact with the show by calling us 615-737-1045, or you also have the F&M Bank chat at your disposal. I'll read some comments from the chat and also take your phone calls here in just a second. Right after I remind you that the live taping for The Install with Greg Cosell, hosted by me, yours truly, at the Analog in the Hutton Hotel on Friday, May the 2nd. The tickets are available now. 50 of the tickets are already gone. Your get-in price is $30. There is a VIP option as well, but you can be there live as Greg takes questions about the Titans free agent class and draft class 1 week, not even a week. It's Friday. It's the Friday after the draft. It's not even a full week removed from the NFL draft. We're going to have tape breakdowns for you. We're going to have audience participation. Obviously, food and beverage are included in the VIP ticket. If you want to be able to purchase those things, besides that, you are able to do so as well. It's just $30 to get in the door. Tickets available at 1045thezone.com. And Jackson, if you could, for the people live streaming the show, drop that link into the F&M Bank chat for those of you who have not gotten the opportunity to get your tickets yet. Loot on YouTube says, talking about the Titans and the plan, generally, no more stopgaps. Answers and solutions only. Stop delaying finding a long-term solution. Okay, well, you're not in a position to operate in like definitives. Like, you're just not. You're 3-14. You have a million different things to figure out. Reasonable expectations are that you're not going to be able to get everything that you need to get done to have a definitive answer and definitive solutions in 2025. That's not the mindset that I personally, if I was a fan of this team, that I would take. Watching them, understanding their roster, understanding where their coaching staff and front office are in their respective timelines, you don't get definitive answers that lead to definitive solutions.
I think he's talking about the quarterback solution specifically, though.
And even then, I would disagree with the idea that you're getting a definitive answer. They can afford to not slow play this thing, but phase through this thing. And that is my expectation of them right now. Could things change between now and April? Of course.
Jaron says the Titans need to stop putting a Band-Aid on the situation and find stability. We haven't had a long-term solution since McNair. I'm not going to dismiss.
Tannehill was a long-term solution. What are you talking about? Marcus was... he didn't make it to a second contract.
Yeah, that's hard for me to call it a long-term
They
solution.
literally just had a long-term solution here, not 3 years ago.
Okay, it was a pretty short long-term, but...
Buddy, he got a second contract here.
Long-term solution to me...
He was 5 years.
Is longer than 5 years. For you to be a starting quarterback for longer than 5 years.
I think that is unrealistic expectations based on the life cycle of the NFL.
When you're drafting a quarterback at number 1 overall, the expectation, the best case scenario, is for him to be your quarterback long-term, which is more than 5 years.
I would say that expectations need adjusting based on the hit rate for those number 1 overall quarterbacks.
Sure.
Because right now it's basically a coin toss.
But I also will not begrudge fans for saying continue to make that coin toss until you hit on one. I will not begrudge fans for saying that. Like, I understand that you have,
all right, you need another one. Try it again.
You have the number 1 overall pick and a huge need at quarterback. It is an opportunity to find the future of the franchise, especially there is risk there if the Titans were to pass on the quarterback position and Cam Ward immediately hits somewhere. And I know situation, it all factors in, but the opportunity is there. Like, we can talk about the solutions here and the possibilities, but what I don't want us to do is just scoff at or just wave away the idea that the Titans should draft a quarterback at number 1 overall.
Nobody did that.
You are scoffing at fans that are tired of having a stopgap and want the long-term solution at quarterback now.
Me resetting expectations is not scoffing. You need to differentiate there, too, because what I am saying is be realistic. That's not scoffing.
You can be realistic and still want the Titans to draft a quarterback.
Yes, you can be realistic and still want the Titans to draft a quarterback, but you can also acknowledge everything else around the situation that makes that not a plug-and-play thing. This is not a turnkey situation. The Titans are in a very difficult spot. And the level of competency that they think that they have brought into the building is the thing that they think is going to help them solve that problem. How they go about it, none of us know because we haven't gotten there yet. 615-737-1045. Your phone calls next. Also, speaking of realistic quarterback options for the Titans. We'll talk about it. Will I have enough money when I retire? When should I start to draw from Social Security? If these questions keep you up at night, let me introduce you to the team that's there to keep you on the right track and guide you through it. That's Trajan Wealth. Trajan Wealth. Trajan Wealth is not just any financial firm. They're your partners in securing your financial future. And they're more than just a fiduciary firm. They're a family-owned, veteran-led team that puts your needs first. Let their decades of experience specializing in retirement planning and wealth management work for you. Trajan Wealth offers free consultations to help you develop your plan and your peace of mind. So call them today at 615-270-5000. That's 615-270-5000, or visit them online at TrajanWealth.com. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This is a paid advertisement. All right, so how you want to play this game? You got realistic options? You want me to take some phone calls first before we get to the realistic options? What do you want?
Let's hear from Steve before we get into this.
Okay, 615-737-1045. The number. Steve is up next if you want to talk some Titans Combine coverage coming your way. The rest, well, I guess we're technically covering the Combine today, but I will be in Indianapolis to cover the Combine for you the rest of the week. Steve, what do you got?
Buck, when you leaving, bud?
Nothing.
Tomorrow?
He asked when you're
Today?
leaving.
Oh, when am I leaving? I am
When
leaving
you leaving?
tonight.
Sweet. So we get Lucas the rest of the week, right?
Yes.
Nice. So, realistic solutions. Let's fix everything. I don't want a stopgap quarterback. Why pay somebody money for a couple of years? And I don't think either one of those two. I mean, do you realistically think Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders can take you to the promised land? Answer
no
that,
idea.
Yes or no?
I have no idea.
Come on, Buck. Come on. No way.
Why? How could you definitively say anything about either of these players who have not taken? One hasn't even talked to a team yet. You cannot say anything definitively about what these players will be at the NFL level. That's nonsense.
Buck, come on now. Where did
You mean come on
Cam
now?
go to school? No. Where did he go to school? Incarnate Ward.
Okay.
You cut me off? Yeah, I'm still here. No, I mean, he went to Incarnate Ward.
And then he went to Washington State, and then he went to Miami, and then he broke the singles or the career
So
touchdown record. What are you talking about?
Don't you really think that if somebody would have wanted him out of high school and then he would have built his career that way? Look at Shedeur. Where did he go? Now, one could say he went to Jackson State because Dad was there already. I just don't put a whole lot of faith in either one of these quarterbacks. But
Okay, well, that's a ridiculous way to do the analysis, but I do appreciate the call, Steve. Like this. Okay, so let me just take. So he's doing it off how they were recruited or what caliber. Because Cam Ward did not have a star assigned to him as a
He was
high
a
school
zero-star
athlete.
prospect. Cam Ward ran a wing T offense in high school. So, yes, he had no major offers. He had no offers, period, coming out of high school. So he went to Incarnate Word, lit it up there, leveled up at Washington State, leveled up at Miami, and his quality of play only improved every time the level went up of where he was playing in his college career.
You know who was a 5-star high school prospect?
I mean,
I'm going to make it local. I'm going to make it about the Titans. 5-star high school prospect, played Power 4, I guess Power 5 at the time, college football, and ended up being a day 2 draft pick in the NFL and hadn't done jack.
who?
Nicholas Petit-Frere.
Oh, I thought you were talking about quarterbacks. So,
No,
okay.
I'm talking about players.
Yeah.
You just described to me what you just outlined, where Steve tried to denigrate the ascension of the player. This man just tried to define him based on who he was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when all Cam Ward has done with those opportunities since then is, to your point, elevate at every level that he's been. Why would I not, if I'm going to play the game that Steve's playing or entertain the hypothetical that Steve wants to make definitive, why would I not also go or be able to go the other direction and say, well, what's to say that he couldn't ascend to a different level as a professional quarterback because he has elevated his game at every stop? Talent matters. Skill matters. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's the complete picture of who the person is and how that marries with the traits, and can the traits become skill?
Well, it's fine to have the opinion that you don't think either of these quarterbacks can be a long-term answer, and that you don't want the Titans to take Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders at number 1 overall.
I agree with you on the opinion, but I'm not.
But
nobody should be definitive about anything before these guys have played a snap.
Yeah, the path to getting there, eliminating Cam Ward because of the prospect he was coming out of high school, we agree. Yeah, it is a flawed exercise.
And also, like, not worth paying a quarterback for a couple of years if you don't want to stopgap it. What were your last 6 years? Did you enjoy the run of success that the Tennessee Titans had, winning division titles on a regular basis, competing with the superpowers in the AFC, arguably being one of them? The Derrick Henry, to Jay's point that I see in the chat, the Tannehill and Henry years, and I understand that you had that is a generational player in Derrick Henry, okay? I'm not disputing that. And that you don't have anybody on this roster right now that would set the Tannehill part of this up for success the way that Derrick Henry obviously did. But do not dismiss the idea of a veteran quarterback not helping you to elevate things here, when you just went through arguably one of the most successful stretches that the franchise has ever had. And it didn't culminate in a Super Bowl. It doesn't for 31 teams. It's really hard to do unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs or the New England Patriots and you have the best player at the most important position and it gives you the best chance to constantly be in that game. And even then, it doesn't guarantee success because Patrick Mahomes just got waxed.
Yeah, plenty of teams in the NFL had success in 2024 with veteran quarterbacks that they did not draft, right? The Vikings, the Bucks, obviously the Seahawks have in the last few years with Geno, the Lions. That's a long list. But, it's a flawed exercise to evaluate quarterbacks as draft prospects based on their sample size as a high school football player. I'm with you on that. Okay, so put together the realistic quarterback options for the Titans in varying degrees of realism, right? They can be just a 1 in a million shot, and
I just do a scale
they
of
can
1
be
to
a
10.
higher percentage chance.
10
scale
being
of 1 to 10.
10 being the most viable, 1 being the least viable.
I'll lay out the scenario for you. You give me scale of 1 to 10, how realistic an option it is for the Titans, not on how realistic the percentage chance of it happening, but how realistic an option it is for the Titans to look at. And we just talked about my first one here. The best player, the most quality player that you could possibly end up with is Matthew Stafford, who's been given permission to speak with other teams to gauge his value. It'll help him and the LA Rams as they figure out where to go from here. They have an out in his contract. If, let's say, the Rams were to just cut Stafford loose, they would take on a $49.3 million dead cap hit. In 2025, he has a cap hit of $49.6 million. In 2026, he has a cap hit of $53.6
And
million.
by the way, you would pay him more if you were to acquire the services of Matt Stafford because he is currently underpaid on that contract.
Yes, he likely wants to get above that $50 million average annual value mark, and he is worth that. So, how realistic is Matthew Stafford as an option for the Tennessee Titans in 2025?
1. I would be shocked.
A 1.
A 1 out of 10. I would be shocked if he was on a team that was not the Los Angeles Rams. There is ongoing conversations. It leaves open the possibility. A 1 is not a 0, right? There is still the slimmest of margins, the slimmest of chances that this player could become available. But I'm going to assume that the Los Angeles Rams, who are not a stupid organization, are not fool enough to let the best available quarterback option of any viable quarterback options that might be available walk to another team, especially in a division that's winnable. The NFC West is winnable. Matt Stafford is a quarterback capable of winning that division. It makes 0 sense to move on from Matt Stafford. I would think that Matt Stafford is a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10 of realistic options for the Titans at quarterback.
Derek Carr is under contract with the New Orleans Saints. They have the number 9 overall pick in the draft. They have 8 draft picks to play with in 2025, and obviously a new head coach in Kellen Moore. There is no young, up-and-coming quarterback, unless you think very highly of Spencer Rattler and or Jake Haener.
And the Saints didn't because they benched them both at various points.
Derek Carr has an out. If the Saints were to cut him loose, they would take on a dead cap hit of $50 million. If they were to cut him loose right now. If they were to keep Derek Carr, he has a cap hit in 2025 of $51.4 million and in 2026 of $61.4 million. They are still very much in the red. They have been in cap hell for a few years now since Sean Payton left. So letting Derek Carr go would be a total reset. You're really building everything out from the ground up, and you got to take on that money straight on.
Well, I don't think you can for that reason. Because they're already in, they're the team in the worst cap situation even after the spike.
Right, but that's the question. Do you want to take on that hit now, or do you want to take on that hit in the next couple years with Carr on your roster if you're the New Orleans Saints?
Trade him for a late-round pick. That's the scenario. Honestly, that's the scenario that seems the most likely to me. He's under contract for another team, so I'm not going to make it a 10. But I will say that it is a 7 on a scale of realistic. He is under contract for another team. He has to become available. But if I'm the Saints, I'm willing to trade Derek Carr for a late-round pick because it would, if the team, now there would also be some level of conversation about, all right, are we taking on the full salary? If we're the Tennessee, like the Jets could do this. Derek Carr is a viable option for a team that's in a better position than, for example, Tennessee.
He wanted to go to the Jets when he was a free agent.
Right.
And ended up at the Saints.
So
they picked Aaron Rodgers, obviously.
I would say that he is a 7 via trade, not via release, because it does not make sense, to your point, it does not make sense for the Saints to eat additional cap hits whilst already being, 50 plus over the cap right now, including the cap raise that everybody just got last year or this offseason?
The trade scenario makes it significantly less realistic to me.
Why?
For the Titans, because then you're talking about giving up draft capital and taking on his contract.
Derek Carr worth a 5th-round pick? Because you don't have to pay the entire contract. Again, the Titans ate a good deal of D-Hop salary.
Yes, but I think of Russell Wilson. When the Broncos just wanted to cut him loose, they took on a ton of dead money, and the Steelers were able to sign him for next to nothing because of how much he was still making from Denver. That, to me, is what would make Derek Carr more realistic for the Titans if the Saints said, let's just take that head on right now, cut him loose, and the Titans could sign him for a whole lot less than what he'll be making in the next couple of years.
If I say Derek Carr for a 5th and the Saints eat half of the money,
yeah,
that's viable to me.
That's viable.
That's the most, I won't say the most viable. I'll say a 7 out of 10.
Kirk Cousins, under contract in 2025, has a cap hit of $40 million. The out in his contract comes in 2026, when the Falcons would take on a dead cap hit of $35 million if they cut him loose. In 2026, Kirk Cousins has a cap hit of over $57 million, and the same goes for 2027. Now, when he was benched for Michael Penix, there was all this talk, all these rumors that the Falcons were going to cut him in the offseason. Haven't seen anything of late about Kirk Cousins other than him talking about an ankle injury that I guess we didn't really know about affecting his play last season. Which
would explain his lack of, he's not a mobile player, but...
Yeah. And honestly, it would make sense because the best Kirk Cousins came in the early portion of the season, coming off of that Achilles injury. We kind of attribute the drop-off to still coming off the Achilles, but he says it was an ankle that was plaguing him. Obviously, Kirk is getting up there in age. He's 36 years old. He'll be 37 in August. So, he is under contract for 2025, currently. Kirk Cousins as a realistic option for the Titans.
3. I think that when he gets benched, it's very easy for anybody who wants the narrative out there that Kirk Cousins might be available to put out there, well, yeah, the Falcons, they should cut him. They should cut him. Let's get that going. Let's start that conversation because this is a player who can play and who thinks he can play at a reasonably high level. I wonder if the benching was not, again, we're not privy to these conversations, but like if Raheem Morris went to Kirk Cousins and said, hey, we're going to sit you down because you're clearly hurting. But that doesn't mean that we're done with you yet. We've committed to you for a significant amount of time. Having Michael here is great, but it doesn't mean that you're done as the Atlanta Falcons quarterback entirely. They haven't said that Michael Penix is the starter for the future for the end of time, right? Like they haven't said that Michael Penix definitively is the 2025 Falcons starting quarterback. So I'm assuming that Cousins still has a chance to be the starting quarterback in Atlanta.
Again, it's rare to bench the veteran option for your first-round quarterback and then go back on it. Now, the Titans did do that with Vince Young and Kerry Collins, went back and forth a little bit.
And Vince's situation
was a very unique situation.
Also, Kirk can make a mess here if he wants to. If Kirk wants out, he can make some noise, and that could help facilitate the potential move. But I would put it on a 3 out of 10. Because I don't, even if he did come loose, I don't think it'd be here.
Sam Darnold, obviously, is a free agent. It's up to the Vikings to decide whether they want to sign him long-term, whether they want to franchise tag, whether they want to tag and trade, or just cut him loose and roll with J.J. McCarthy, which I think is a big risk for a team that is still in a Super Bowl window in terms of their talent roster. Sam Darnold as a realistic option for the Titans.
8. He's the only unrestricted free agent that we've talked about, right? Other than Rodgers. We haven't talked about Rodgers, I guess.
Darnold would, other than Stafford, make the most money out of any of these quarterbacks.
That's fine.
On a new deal.
He is the most realistic because he is, as we sit here on February the 24th, he is the most available of any of these quarterbacks. So I would inherently give him a few extra points there. He is a player who hasn't necessarily earned the right to dictate terms, but could certainly command a significant financial windfall here. The Titans do have the money to pay him, depending on how they stagger the cap. I also would be surprised to see him leave Minnesota because that's a significant window that you're gambling on J.J. McCarthy, who hasn't played an NFL snap in the regular season yet. So, but because he is an unrestricted free agent on this list, because the Titans are in the quarterback market, I would say I would put the highest percentage chance of any of these players just because he's an unrestricted free agent and there's less that has to happen to get Sam Darnold.
Aaron Rodgers, who will be a free agent once the Jets let him go.
One. No, thank you. Again, the idea of Brian Callahan in any kind of uncertainty about his professional future, tying himself to Aaron Rodgers after surviving the Will Levis season is unthinkable to me.
Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, both free agents out of Pittsburgh. The Steelers have publicly said they would like to keep one, likely not both, but one of those two. It would be surprising if that one was Russell Wilson with the way his play dropped off in his advanced age. Justin Fields helped them to a 4-2 start as the starter last year when Russell was hurt, but they quickly went to Russell Wilson when he was healthy and ready to come in. So Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, 1 to 10, the level of...
both of them?
Either one.
Fields I'd put less likely because I think Pittsburgh is going to... Whatever they do additionally to Fields, I think Fields, well, I don't know anything definitively, so let me not speak out of turn here, but the logic in my head makes more sense to keep Fields and release Russ or let Russ walk. Not let him cook, but let him walk. What does Russell Wilson want at this stage of his career?
Made a lot of money.
So money's not necessarily the most important thing. It's not inconsequential. Russ still wants to be compensated fairly, but he's won a Super Bowl. Does he want to compete at the highest level? Because if he comes here, you understand that you're signing up for a slow burn, right? The Titans would be lucky to be competing for a wild card spot this year. They would be lucky to be anywhere near the conversation of wild card after how bad they were in 2024. And just because they were that awful in 2024 does not necessarily mean that they have to, that's the baseline, right? It's easy to look at it that way and say, well, if they were that in 2024, they still have a lot of work in 2025. You could expect some things to level out a little bit, and Russ would help you turn or help cut down on the turnovers, but he has limitations. I don't know. I'll say a 3 on Fields and a 5 on Russ. That it?
That's it.
All right, very good. Last call for phone calls if you got them. 615-737-1045 is the number. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone.
Did you know you're overpaying for your health and wellness products?
With over 20 company-owned brands offering its members vitamins, supplements, wellness, and skincare products, you're able to save up to 70% off retail.
Members Nutrition can't change your life, but we can change the way you live.
All right. I'm ready to hit the road. Get on up to Indianapolis, see all the sights and sounds, have a little steak, a little shrimp cocktail. Have a great time. Lucas and Jackson are going to hold it down here. I am also looking forward to talking to Brian Callahan. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. Obviously, I've had my differences with the approach that the Titans took in 2024. I think that it's fair to offer him the opportunity to push back on some of those criticisms and obviously to talk about what lies ahead, because that's the most important thing. Mike Borgonzi and Callahan both on the radio show tomorrow from Indy. We will tell you more about the special guests that we have planned as we get confirmation from everybody. But going to be a lot of fast-moving parts in Indy this week, not least of which is because the news cycle tends to kick up in Indianapolis around free agency and around, obviously, the quarterback conversation, with which Titans fans are very much interested in. Bert said he brought some Daniel Jeremiah tweets in here for us to discuss quickly before we wrap things up with some phone calls that I had missed earlier. Something to the effect of, I've been looking at his Twitter right now, @MoveTheSticks. I've been reading about this free agency class for the last few days, and it's making me even more fired up for the NFL scouting combine. Not a lot of excitement on the used car lot this year. It's a good year to buy new.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. Sam Darnold, I guess, is the free agent with the most buzz.
Oh. I mean, it's probably still Rodgers, but I get what you're saying.
No, it's Darnold. It's Darnold. He's going to make more money. I mean, Rodgers can be a bigger headline, but Darnold is the most impactful free agent.
From a football practicality standpoint, you are correct. From a buzz standpoint, Aaron Rodgers is going to take up a lot of oxygen.
We'll see, man. Again, we played that audio from Ty Dunn the other day of what if the NFL just ices out Aaron Rodgers?
Lucas, if he doesn't get a job, it's an even bigger story.
Yeah, I guess so.
If Aaron Rodgers was a used car, what kind of used car would he be?
Oh, it's a great question. I'm not a big car guy, so I feel like I would not have a good answer.
I'm thinking DeLorean.
That's too old. I would say, no, it's something that, requires a lot of maintenance.
But it's fancy.
Something higher end, right? So, like, if you
and if there's any single human in the NFL that thinks he's capable of time travel, it would probably be Rodgers.
Yes, it's really weird and out there. You don't really know what's going on with it.
Yeah, I think I'm with Jackson on that one.
So maybe I say a late model Porsche or a late model Maserati, like something that's good at, like, You're sinking a lot of money.
And that transmission's ready to just fall out of the back of it over on Old Hickory Boulevard.
It's days away, and you may be able to open it up on 65 one time, but that one time is not going to be worth the amount of money that you have to pour into it, the maintenance. So
yeah, recently had a pop tire.
Late model sports car.
I'm with Jackson on the DeLorean, but instead of there being a time machine in the car, there's just like some ayahuasca in the glove box that can just transport him to wherever he wants to go.
Oh, goodness. So, Daniel Jeremiah, an interesting tweet there. Last call for phone calls. If you got them, now we're getting call submissions.
On what car Aaron Rodgers would be?
You guys are ridiculous. You never know what's going to set off the callers. But I know Ann wants to specifically talk about quarterbacks. Hey, Ann.
Hi there. So when we were y'all were talking about previous veteran quarterbacks who are in free agency, I couldn't help but think that we have three people in this Titans front office and coaching staff who have drafted a quarterback and had them sit. So Chad Brinker was with Green Bay when they took Jordan Love. He sat behind Rodgers, Borgonzi, obviously Mahomes and Alex Smith. And Brian Callahan was at Denver when they took Brock Osweiler in the second round and had him sit behind Peyton.
Mm-hmm.
How far back can you realistically draft a quarterback and not play them on day one?
Oh, that's a good question, and that's good context. Thank you for it, Ann.
Baker was number 1 overall. He did not play until week 3 when Tyrod Taylor went down in Cleveland.
That's the most recent example. They're pretty few and far between of the number 1 overall pick.
Jared Goff did not play until like week 9 in his rookie year.
Yeah,
Case Keenum
probably helped get Jeff Fisher fired, to be honest.
Case Keenum was the starter all year long. So,
I'm going to say, in today's day and age, I'm going to say that a top 5 player at the position is probably going to start, if not week 1, no later than the first month.
Even if it's not in their best interest.
It's true. I mean, rarely is it in their best interest. None of them are ready. Like none of them are ready when they get to the NFL. It's a losing proposition, but I would say, within the range of the top 5, if you're taking a quarterback there, that player is going to get out there sooner rather than later. I'm not going to take the calls on the car stuff.
Oh, come on.
That's a slippery slope, man.
No, we have
got
polls. I got to get out of here. Come on. I appreciate the calls. Give me the polls.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. What is the most important thing the Titans have to learn at the Combine? John says if the Browns are also looking to trade, so it helps the Titans get some trade offers as well. King of Clubs says who their trade partner will be. Titan Soup says they need to learn that they need to draft Abdul Carter. Derek says, for me, I don't need to know anything about the quarterbacks at the Combine, but they do need to be studying the other players. We still need O-line help, and another receiver or two wouldn't be bad either. I mean, for me, the first and foremost thing you have to learn at the Combine is, are either of these quarterbacks viable for us at the number 1 overall pick, right? Doesn't every decision sprout from there? Because if you believe one of these quarterbacks can be your guy, you draft the quarterback.
It's really more about Cam Ward because they've had more time with Sanders than they'll get with Sanders this time around, right? In the lead up, and maybe some stuff has changed. Maybe they have some follow-ups based on tape study that are worth asking, but it's more to me about, hey, do we like Cam Ward as a person? Because this will be our first opportunity to actually talk to the kid.
Do you care that Shedeur Sanders is not working out at the Combine? 67.4% say no, don't care.
No, and I'm glad to see that a sizable majority feels that way too, because the Combine's fine. The Pro Day is fine. The Senior Bowl and stuff like that is more important than even those things, frankly, as far as the playing of football, and the tape is more important than any of it.
Which Vols football player will rise up draft boards the most in the pre-draft process? Karen and KJ believe it'll be running back Dylan Sampson. John says Omar Norman Lott.
Omar Norman Lott had a lot of love coming out of Mobile.
Yeah.
Biggest draft riser? I don't know. Interior defensive line, I might take him over the running back.
By the way, the Vols men's basketball team went up 1 spot in the AP poll that just came out. They jumped Bama, who went down to 6. So Tennessee, the number 5 team in the country, they'll play LSU tomorrow night and then host Bama Saturday. Lady Vols went up to number 11 in the country after a win over Florida yesterday.
All right.
Which of these is the most realistic veteran quarterback option for the Titans? Stafford, Carr, Darnold, or Rodgers? Most of the votes went to Derek Carr, 41.3%. 27.9% say Rodgers, then 16% say Stafford, and 14% who said Darnold.
I'm sorry, I got distracted. The answer is Darnold because he's the only unrestricted free agent on that list.
Well, Rodgers will be as well.
Well, yeah, I guess, but no thank you. Thank God the show is over because I just saw a comment that would make steam pour out of my ears. Matt Proctor says on YouTube, Shedeur already having a history of opting out. Diva much? Man, shut up.
Just prepare yourself. It's draft season, buddy.
It sure as hell is. And I'm headed to Indianapolis, and the vibes will be high. Mike Borgonzi, Brian Callahan tomorrow. See you there.